Welcome to the Zandbergen Report, where wealth strategies and investment wisdom collide, featuring your distinguished host and certified financial planner, Bart Zandbergen.
Welcome to the Zandbergen Report, a showcase for wealth strategies and investment wisdom that's essential for our revolving world. Today, Paul, it's not wealth strategies.
It's something wealthier than that. It's the wealth of the soul.
Wealth of the soul.
I like that.
Very, very good. And it may, actually could even call it wisdom of the soul.
Yeah, I like
Maybe
that
wisdom
too.
by the end.
Well, everybody, we're so excited to be here. We have a full house, and today is our annual holiday wine pairing show.
Ooh.
So in order to help with this show, we have got a full crew.
And wait, can I just open the door a little bit, because there's a lot of people out there. See, they're all
We need a full
They're all
breakdown
excited.
here for sure.
That's right. So we have, of course, in studio our engineer Paul. We have my partner in crime, Letitia Burbaum, and
Hey.
our once a year annual show up only for the wine tasting show.
I mean, of course, every now and again, a publicist needs a glass of wine.
That's
And
right.
when you say, "Hey, Paula, I have wine," I say, "What time?" And I am there.
Can I tell you something funny here before we start here? I was a publicist for 20 years, celebrities, whatnot, and only thing you could get a publicist to show up for was free food, free booze.
It's
You say free
terrible. They
food,
get a bad rep. That is
they
not.
will show
I
up
will just-
anywhere. Free food, free booze.
Terrible. That's old generation. This is new generation, Paul. New generation.
When the movie studios wanted you guys to come out, it was free booze and free food.
Sterling
We showed up.
PR does things differently.
Okay, all right.
However, I will never miss this annual wine tasting. Will not happen.
Perfect. All right, let's get this show rolling. We have got wine here on the table. It is open.
Walk us through what you got first. Give a little plug to everybody here, and then you can start talking about it.
So you know what? I am going to plug those as we get
Oh, okay,
into
all
it
right.
because there's a method to my
There's a
madness,
method,
Paul.
all right. So tell us first a little background. For those who've been living under a rock, you know a little bit about wine.
Yeah, I would say so.
More than a little
One way
bit.
to put it.
So I have had some training.
Real training, serious training.
Some would call it excessive or obsessive training.
Yes.
But at the end, I have accomplished something called a certified sommelier, and that is through an organization called the Court of Masters. So there are technically 4 levels. There's a level 1, which just gives you some basic training. The level 2, you're then able to call yourself a certified sommelier. And then there's levels 3 and 4, an advanced, and then a master, which if anyone has seen the documentary called SOM, S-O-M-M, it actually tracks a number of individuals on their path to becoming master sommeliers, of which the current count, I think, is 199 in the entire
That's what I said,
world.
200,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
In the entire
Wow,
world.
that's
So
neat.
why is this so hard, even at a certified level, to get certified? What is so? This isn't just a weekend course you take somewhere here.
Correct. This was years of training, so much so that I don't remember if I've shared this online before, but on the last day, there was 2 days left of my training, and so I had test scheduled for Monday, and I had, first of all, let me back up to say what you need to do in order to pass the test is you have to know basically every wine in the world, where it's from.
Like really? I mean, seriously, yeah.
The history of wine. You need to be able to taste the wine and determine what the wine is, and then you have to be able to properly serve wine.
And do you do blind tastings like they do at the master level? Do they just give you wine and you have to know what that is and spot on what year, where it comes from, everything?
Yes, 8 in the morning. So
8 in the morning, right?
Yeah,
Wow.
first thing.
And how many do they give you at the certified? I know it gets tougher as you go up, but even at a certified level, how many do they present you?
So 1 white and 1 red.
And I'm just going to bring you a white
Just
wine,
one.
and you got to know not only varietal, it's a Chardonnay or whatever.
Correct.
And you got to know winery,
You have to know region
region, okay.
and then vintage.
Vintage.
Yeah.
What year? Like this is an 88
Correct.
or something.
Correct.
Because it does vary that much. Now, how in the world could any of us mere mortals ever hope to tell? I could tell it's a Chardonnay. I might even have some little more knowledge than that, but I wouldn't know if it's an 88 or a 98 or whatever. I know there's differences, but I'm not that sophisticated to tell.
Yeah, so I'm not going to tell you all of my secrets, but what I
okay.
will say, there is a process, and the Court of Masters teaches you, it's called deductive tasting. So you start out very high level, if you're looking at a funnel, and you would say, okay, obviously, is it red or white? It's white.
Yeah.
So now we're going down the white path. And then you would say, from there's a visual part, and then there's a smell part, and then there's a taste part. And through the deductive tasting process, it's a process of elimination. And the first big delimiter is this old world or is this new world? And by old world, just to make it simple, it's Europe, and new world is, to make it simple, anything but Europe. So everything North America, Australia, South Africa.
That's a big world, though. I mean, how many wineries in California alone? There's got to be thousands?
Probably close to 1,000. There's AVAs, which are American viticular areas. So yeah, there was a lot. So in preparation for that, in the last couple of days, final studies are on, and I used our bedroom and our bed as my work zone. So I had maps laid out, iPads, flashcards, everything going on. And this is slightly embarrassing, but also very funny. Well, at least it was funny for me, not so much for my wife. As she came in, 4:00 on Sunday afternoon, my test was the next morning, and she had like tears running down her eyes. And I'm like, honey, what's wrong? And now, remember, I'd been up since like 5 in the morning, and I'd been studying since. And she said, are you having an affair?
Because only that could explain this kind of obsession.
This behavior.
Yeah.
So I said, can I get back to you tomorrow after?
Can we argue tomorrow after I...
Current affair is with studying.
Yeah.
Outside of that, no.
So then wake up the next morning. This particular, once a year, they hold it at the Montage in Laguna Beach, which is near where we live. And one of the things that I never do in test taking is I stop studying around 6 o'clock the night before, and I don't do anything more. It's time to relax and just let everything sink in.
Right.
So that morning I had decided, I wasn't studying, but I was going to do one last run on wine service. Now, this is from a guy who his entire life has never worked in the service industry.
Have you ever been a waiter?
No waiter, no bar, no host, no nothing. But I had practice knowing that this was part of the test.
Which is how to present it and how to pour it and how to carry it, how to open it. And
how to open, pour, communicate, answer questions, serve on the right side properly. So I had the glasses on the tray. First thing I did was knock one glass over, which knocked over every glass and bottle and preparation. So Tina was great to say, okay, you got that out of your system. You're good now. So
there you go.
So good.
Yeah, which was. So that was a grueling, it's an all day. The 8 o'clock is the wine tasting. And then you go from there, small break, and then you go to, it's about 200 questions. Essay, multiple choice, etc. of, again, questions about wine in the entire world, small lunch break, and then you break up individually, and there's 4 master sommeliers around a big room in the Montage, and you then are serving this master sommelier and his 3 imaginary friends, his or her 3 imaginary friends, as he dictates what each one is having, and will ask, hey, so-and-so is having this, what do you recommend as an aperitif, and then how about for the salad course, and then we're thinking about having this, and he's having that, all while you're trying to properly open a wine in front of a master sommelier, which is no pressure.
No pressure.
And so what's the pass rate? Pretty low.
It's about 19%, actually.
1 out of 5. 1 out of 5 passes assessed after all that.
Yeah. So that was a day of celebration to have that beyond. And then when I actually...
Where's the confetti, Paul? You have all these great sounds.
What do you think of that, folks? They're still excited out there, yeah.
And about a week later, just to kind of finish up, and I'm going to leave Tina alone, I thought, honey, you know what? I've kind of been thinking about maybe doing the advanced
no.
Really?
He slapped you upside the head, yeah.
Right. I'm just going to leave it at that. And
I think you should just enjoy this one.
Yeah, I'm clearly not an advanced sommelier at this point. But just to kind of finish up on the training, because sometimes there is some confusion. That's the most, I think, popular or most well-known is the certified sommelier. But the other courses I was taking concurrently, one, because I'm obsessive compulsive, and 2, because
I guess so, yeah.
They were actually really good training to get to my ultimate goal, which was a certified sommelier. One is called the WSET, or Wine Spirits Education Trust.
What's that?
It's located in London, England, and it's a foundation or a university that teaches not only wine but spirits and all sorts of alcohol history.
Did you go there?
So
Take the courses?
sadly, I didn't have to go to London. That would have been
Sadly.
nice. But there is actually the master sommelier, who was one of the trainers for the Court of Masters, also is in a way up on the WSET. So he was teaching courses that I went in person.
Oh, neat.
So that was very, very helpful. That was a couple of years. I haven't gone through the beginning, intermediate, and advanced, and I finished that. And then just because there was one thing left undone, and it was the Certified Specialist of Wine offered by the Society of Wine Educators.
You need to get that.
I thought, well, it's one thing left. How
Right,
can I
what
not?
else? Right?
Check every
When did
box.
you do that?
That was about 2 weeks before I sat for the Certified
Are
Sommelier.
you kidding me? 2 weeks before?
No.
Well, no wonder Tina thought this. Oh my god.
Because nobody could be that into anything. This has to be a cover for
And this
something.
is a hobby.
Yeah, hobby.
my gosh.
And which is so interesting because to date, definitely the Certified Sommelier, harder than any certification, and Letitia and I share like certified financial planner training and my divorce training and our securities license, all very hard, all which makes us money. To date, not one penny.
Yeah,
Not
right.
one penny.
Right, it
Enjoyed
really
it?
is an
100%.
obsession. Right?
Enjoyed
Yeah.
100%. All right. So,
But my favorite part is when we go to an event and they have food, and then you'll say, Tish, you got to try this one. Or we're getting ready to have a meal, and then you go try this with that, and all of a sudden
It comes
the,
alive,
The
yeah.
food tastes completely different. It's like magic for me.
'Cause
So
it is
thank you.
It is chemistry,
enjoy
after
it.
all. It is
Yeah.
chemistry of how
Yeah.
these things interact with one another. Now,
Yeah.
the thing I never asked you before is, so once you pass this, how does anybody know? Do you have a secret handshake? There's a little card?
You have a publicist. That's what
Well,
it
yeah.
is.
right.
You know, in the military, they have these challenge coins.
Paul.
If you're in the Green Beret or something, you get to pull it out and something here. You know, what is it that they give you? Could I just say I'm a master sommelier? I can.
You have a card, right?
So I have
should borrow
cards that
this
say
card.
I'm a certified sommelier. I have a certificate, but other than that, it's a somewhat of a small world, and so
They
most
know.
of the time when we go places, either with my wife or if I'm with Tish somewhere, they kind of already know, so we kind of get pretty cool treatment.
That's so fun.
So if this career doesn't work out, eventually you can just become a wine master here and travel the world. And
Yeah, 27 years of it. Yeah, the financial advisor thing doesn't work out. I've
He's
got.
not leaving anytime soon, Paul. So don't get too excited. I enjoy this being his side hobby.
that's right.
All right, so what
So
I'm
start
pouring,
us off here.
Yeah, what I'm pouring now, and there's a reason I'm pouring this now. Not only is it would be nice for the holidays, but as my master sommelier told me, this happens to be a Riesling, a dry Riesling,
Okay, I'm going to hold it to the camera so you guys can take a look.
and it happens to be from the Santa Ynez Valley in California. The winemaker is Fess Parker. But a Riesling is what you drink during the day while you're thinking about what you're going to have for dinner, for
During the
wine for
day.
dinner.
So it's your
Yeah.
thinking wine.
This is
your
your thinking
Got
wine.
it.
Okay, I really
Thinking
like that. I
wine.
think I might need this in the office when I need to think extra.
All right, so
Yeah,
give
I
us
think I need
give us
thinking
the little
wine.
rundown. First of all, you
Thinking
didn't
wine.
hold it by the base like so many wine snobs do.
Well,
here.
I'm not. Oh,
Some people
the
hold it at the
glass.
base, and then I can't show it on. Do you don't do that? Do you grab it by the stem and do
yeah,
all
I
that?
Bert,
think
show us
it's-
how do we hold the glass?
It's, one. So the basic thing is you don't, especially white wine, you don't want to hold it by the glass for anyone who's watching, because that will change the temperature of the wine. Obviously, your body's warmer than a chilled white
Heats it
wine.
up ever so little, right?
Can we also talk about the glasses for a second before you go into
Oh,
the
wow.
wine?
Yeah,
Because
that's
I learned something from you, and I thought that was so fantastic
Each wine has a glass, really.
on the glasses. No, but can you share a little bit about?
Yeah, I came
glass?
so close to bringing varietal specific glasses today, but
I thought you
and
would.
Of course, Tish would call you out.
I came this close, but for two reasons. One, I'm like, they're really going to think I've completely lost mine. So that was one reason. That's one reason I
you're
did it.
very thorough.
And the second is I just only had so many shoulders and bags, and I didn't have
True.
for 4
Yeah,
glasses. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I got the most general glass I could. But to that point, at being one of the world's largest, not only OCD but also big cynic, I thought there is no way.
This is all recorded.
a-
This is quite interesting.
Yeah.
It was good. We're documenting. Keep going.
I didn't.
Cool.
I thought there was no way a wine would taste different in a different glass, right? I mean,
Which I believed you, by the way.
and so I have done now to date 4 different blindfolded tastings with varietal specific, and every single time the wine tastes better in a glass that's specifically made for that varietal.
And why? Because it focuses it focuses the fragrance, or it allows it to breathe more or less, or whatever, get more or less air.
Yeah, pretty much all. Yeah, all of the above. Each wine has its own different, I don't know, characteristics or parameters. Like
Some react to air better, some don't want as much air, some need to open up and breathe, as they say, some want to be more contained. And
That's
Right.
a fun holiday challenge. I think that you should put that on part of our notes from the show, because I think that would be a great game. Because I literally challenged you, and I didn't think. I'm like, there's just no way
Yeah.
that the glass that you put it in is going to make the wine taste any different. And
Right.
it actually does.
And I think you have a certain brand or certain type of wine
Ooh,
glass.
yeah,
that
is
you
there
would
certain
like to
glasses?
share
so
with us?
there
Riedel
are.
or- no.
Yeah, Riedel. They're one of the probably the primary providers of. They may even be the originators of the varietal specific.
shout out to Riedel. Is it Riedel or Riedel?
A Riedel.
Riedel, okay.
Ooh, I have those at home.
Yeah. So
That's
there's
cool.
another. Here's another Riedel story that's related. So have you? So we're getting back to. I'm going to get there. So you hold the glass not by the glass, but by the stem. Some people are by the base. It's personal preference. I like the stem. But you've probably noticed in the last few years that there are stemless glasses. So yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
my wife
yes.
actually likes those. Yeah.
Yeah. So I will use, so for me personally, I'll use those if there's no other option, i.e. if I have a plastic cup or a stemless, I'll go for the stemless. One of the problems is, of course, there's no stem to hold on to, so you're forced to hold the glass. But at least it's glass, so that part is good. But
What about plastic, Bart?
plastic
Oh.
only.
That's a tough one.
I'd almost rather drink out of the bottle,
Yes.
but I have been known to drink out of a red solo cup as needed.
It's the
Sometimes you gotta do
holidays.
what you
You've
gotta
seen
do.
it all.
Yeah. Anyway, so the origination of the stemless glass is kind of interesting. I learned this at the Riedel specific blind tastings. So I believe it's the generation of the grandson of the Riedel family who created all the Riedel glasses. Moved from Germany, where Riedel is from. Double check. Yes, Germany. Moved into a New York apartment. Had his glasses. Tried to fit him in the small cabinets. And
Oh my goodness.
the glasses don't fit. So he goes back.
I need a solution.
Has a solution and creates stemless glasses so they fit in his
Perfect.
New York
Brilliant.
apartment.
Oh my
Of course,
gosh.
because if he goes, if I have a problem,
Other
there's more
people.
people
Yeah.
that also have the same
Yeah.
problem.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah,
I always
absolutely.
wondered how that
Yeah.
came about.
Yeah.
And so then,
So smart.
so last thing on glasses, and Paul, you're gonna try the
Paul,
plastic.
what Don't do it.
I'm going to bring out some plastic for you. No, I just thought in case, because I can only drink
That's
a
what I thought.
little
I
of this.
thought
I may
Paul
have
was getting out the
to. I may have
plastic
to
cup,
pour
and I
out
thought,
some
oh,
of these
no.
here just as I taste.
Paul,
it.
you're not pouring out your wine. Paul.
Well, if anybody wants to, I got a little bucket.
So yeah, that's not happening in this crew here.
Okay.
I'll drink it all instead.
So the last thing on sparkling wine or champagne, I don't know if you've noticed, but there has been a trend to go away from the tall flutes to a
yeah.
more not quite like the glass we have here, which most people won't be able to see, but these are full glasses, but more like a white wine glass. Again, for the same reasons you said, Paul, it's less for the ambiance and for the visual of the bubbles going up and down, but more for the air inside.
Let's talk about one other thing here. And big argument I always have at holidays: open up the wine, let it breathe. No, just grab it out of the fridge or just yank it and pour it here. Most people just want to pour it, and it's like,
You opened them before the show opened.
Yeah.
Started.
got to.
So I almost without exception will open wine, if I can, an hour or so.
An hour.
Oh, wow.
Now,
Okay.
so
What's a good time frame rule of thumb? An hour?
So again, we'll go to varietal. We go to how old the wine is. So whites you can open pretty much right before.
Right before.
Younger wines, like especially whites, you can open right before. Older wines, especially reds, will benefit from some air.
Yeah.
And then that goes into also decanting. People have probably heard or seen beautiful decanters that allows air to come in. And again, in a blind tasting, there's a significant taste difference.
But come on now, Paula goes out and parties all the time. So does Letitia. You guys never
Paul, this
have
is
been
terrible. You threw me a
anywhere.
bad rap.
You've never
Wow.
gone anywhere where people didn't just open the wine and start pouring it. Come on, tell
I'm
the
sure
truth.
it happens all the time.
That happens all the time.
Yeah.
I mean,
bars,
most people just open it and pour it.
Yeah, for sure.
They don't prepare
So
it.
what are we drinking now, Bart?
So this is a dry Riesling, as I mentioned. It's from Santa Ynez Valley, Santa Barbara County, and so originally the origination of Riesling comes from Germany or the northern France, Alsace. Riesling has a reputation of being very sweet, but they have a full range. There's like 6 different levels, and we're probably on either the driest or the second level. And
Dry means less sweet, right?
correct.
Less sugar.
Riesling is also next to Champagne, which I didn't bring any today because we focused on it last time, which, as you all know, everyone seems to know, that's my favorite go-to.
Yeah.
So, by the way, any holidays, anything you want to eat, Champagne can go good, everything, all day.
I have a question for storing it. Can I change it just for 1 second?
Yep.
What would be the temperature that I would want to store this Riesling? Can I just throw it in the fridge? Can I put it on ice?
Yeah, there's some controversy on that. I like my white wines on the cooler side, so I do put them in the regular refrigerator. So I'm getting them down in the 50s probably.
50s. So it's crisp.
Yeah, but truly to get the full
crisper then would make a crisper flavor to it, or
well,
like
they're
an apple almost, yeah.
Well, this you'll find with this, you're tasting a little pear, a little bit of apple, more green apple. But the correct temperature is about 65 degrees for white wine to get the full flavor.
Because if you chill it too much, then it closes it up like a flower. It doesn't have the same aroma and fragrance and stuff, right?
Correct.
So we've talked about Fess Parker before, and so I'm just wondering, is there something specific you love about Fess Parker in general?
We got to get Paul a little closer to the mic. Yeah.
Hold on here.
And why
my
did you-
Fess Parker question. So I was just wondering if there's something that Bart loves about Fess Parker as a winery and how they produce their wines.
Sure.
And while you're doing that, I have a second question, because I was going to ask the same thing. Fess Parker is kind of it's not a super high premium brand, although he's well known in the area, and I think, as you obviously agree, it's more of a. I thought the wines would be unattainable that you would bring in here. That's an attainable wine. That's not the.
Look at you. You think I'm a wine snob?
Yeah, well, because look at your background. You're only going to drink $500 bottles here and stuff. Yeah.
You drink good wine.
So at the end, it's all personal taste, and to Tish's point, I drink good wine, and the red wine we have is going to be a higher price point. But so to answer multiple questions,
and I'm going to add one more to the same one. It's what's the price point of the Riesling that we're drinking right now?
yeah, it's about $25-30.
Okay.
Right, so that's something you could see at or at High Times or something. Or whatever.
You'd be hard pressed to find a Riesling. You can find them, but to be much more than that, it's just not an expensive varietal.
Okay.
So to get to the Fess Parker, that's someplace I've been going to for almost 20 years. And although it does have a celebrity name, they've really, really good quality winemaking. And they focus on areas and the varietals that are near and dear to me, which are more the Burgundy style, which are typically Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. That's kind of their flagship. They also do a great Syrah. Now, that happens to be all in the area. I happen to have another wine. The next wine we're having is from the same area, a different winery.
Can I give you a shocking thing? I'm gonna test. This was done to me early in our show today. I forget how quickly we forget these TV stars, these movie stars. Fess Parker, I grew up with. Bart probably grew up with. I'm a little older, so I remembered the shows that he was on. I'll bet these two young ladies couldn't even tell you what Fess Parker's claim to fame was.
I would love to have an answer for that, and I don't. But
See,
I would love to hear it, Paul. Come on,
I'm just
give
shocked.
it to me.
Well, he was Daniel Boone on TV for a million years, the TV series, and before that he played Davy Crockett in all the Disney
Davy
stuff.
Crockett.
Davy
So, and
Crockett.
he passed just a few years ago. He
Yeah.
would be at the winery, lovely
Really?
gentleman. Yeah, in his older days.
How neat.
Oh, that
Just
had
hanging
Signing
out.
art, so great. But his son and grandchildren are the winemakers, and hey, what the heck?
Maintaining
He was
legacy.
able to, they do a great job, and their winery is beautiful. So there's a lot of wonderful things about it.
So can I ask another question? So as we're approaching the holidays, my favorite part is not only are we drinking a fantastic wine, but what food would this really complement when we're preparing
Boy, you've
our
read
holiday?
you've read the show notes here today.
Well, that's my favorite part overall. I want to know what will make this wine
Because
even better.
if you don't pair it with the right food, and I see this all the time, the wine tastes great, and then they have it with dinner and it's not so great. The food kills the wine or buries it or whatever, vice versa.
So I think that's all true, but I think there's also to my earlier point, you're not eating all day, right? So you're going to get to someone's house, and
Yeah,
usually
at
we
my
entertain.
family's house, yeah.
And like, what are you going to drink
like a
while
cheese and
you're
crackers.
snacking cheese and crackers, or what are you drinking while you're waiting to get to
Right.
dinner?
Yeah.
So That's what I would use Riesling for. That would be your white option for that.
Okay.
I would do that
Riesling, cheese and
or
crackers.
champagne. Or sparkling wine to be more
What would
technical.
be another, like, what's
How about
specific-
Sauvignon? How about
what's-
Sauvignon Blanc?
Hold on, Paul. I want to be very specific
Okay.
on the wine that we're at. So, like, what are foods that would actually complement it? So, like, you're saying, like, the cheese, the crackers, anything else that would bring out the flavor of this
So
wine?
one of
This
the best things about Riesling, much like sparkling wine or champagne, is it's the easiest wine to pair food with. So it
All of
goes
them. It would
with
blend with
almost
all of them.
you know, vegetarian, white meat. I would probably not do this if I was having a heavy steak. There's not going to be any benefit to
Got
that.
it.
But as
Something light,
you're
snacks.
arriving for Thanksgiving at someone's house and you're looking for something to do or to drink while you're waiting
Or
for
Christmas or New Year's.
or Christmas and New Year's. We have
Yeah.
a couple holidays coming
Yeah.
up. But I think it's the great kind of a starter for the white option. And
Got
where we
it.
live, it's typically warmer, and on the holidays, we typically have nice sunny days. And
yeah.
Right.
for me,
Right.
some of my wine choices are based on what the weather is, and if it's
Oh,
warm
interesting.
outside,
It's cool, crisp, and it's refreshing.
Yeah,
I never heard that
I
before.
could see why
Yeah.
you factor that in. That makes sense.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
because it's cooler and
Now, how about some of the other traditional kind of everyday, the Sauvignon Blancs or Viognier or something? You can pour some of those today, or are those just similar kinds of starter styles?
He's
So
ready
tho-
for the next one.
yeah, he's ready. He's like, hey,
He
when's
is.
the
He's
next
like,
wine
okay.
coming?
Move this along here.
Are you wanting more of your wine here?
I mean, we
Paul.
poured
Or
you
you
more,
want-
Paul. What's
Paul.
Oh, you
happening
poured me
here?
more of that one? Oh, I can't.
Absolutely.
Oh,
It says feed the producer.
I gotta
It
run
said
the
right
rest
on
of the shows
notes,
here today.
feed
Here.
the producer.
I know.
Okay.
I'm trying to follow directions here.
I was up to the next one here. All right.
All right,
So
Bart.
that's the sound of everyone tasting the wine. Okay, so
What about dinner? What if we're
all right,
going to
so
jump
leading
into
up-
like a
so-
holiday meal?
all right, if we're talking about we have Thanksgiving just around the corner.
So what if a traditional family's having turkey and stuffing and cranberries? What would I serve at my table that I would get 5 stars from everyone? It would be a great tip. Like maybe, and then what we're going to be drinking today as well.
Perfect. Well, part of what I brought today does correlate to a Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh, fantastic.
And also correlated to my sommelier test. And I will tell you that although I got the answer right, I did get a little mark that I could have done better
Oh my gosh.
from my master sommelier. And I went into when
I'll bet
I
that drove
love
you
how he
crazy
said
too.
that. He said,
you-
I got
sticks in
that
your
right.
memory.
And then there was an area of improvement, which that's all he focused
You
on.
will never
course,
forget
right?
that one little
Of course.
comment on that.
Forget that I got it right.
Most people are like, hooray, I got through the darn thing. He's like, that one little comment. I'll never forget that moment.
So sorry.
So when he asked, as we were going around, he says, "Oh, and then this gentleman's going to have a traditional Thanksgiving." I don't know why we had different things, but I said, "Well, so I qualified by saying I have 2 options. If your guest would like a white wine, it's a turkey. It's going to be, turkeys are typically buttery-ish, like a Chardonnay, a nice California buttery oak Chardonnay would be great. If, on the other hand, he wants a red option, Pinot Noir would go great because of the cranberries, etc." And right before I got to Pinot Noir, he goes, "You only get one." Boom. So I'm like, okay. So I didn't even get like Pinot
I
Noir
like
out.
options, so you're
Yeah.
okay.
You confuse them, you lose them.
Yeah.
So on
That's true.
my test score is like Pinot Noir would have been a better option. I'm like, tried to tell you. Anyway, so
Wow.
to answer your question, so for the early courses, like maybe it's if everyone does things different. If you have a salad course or charcuterie, Riesling is great. A Sauvignon Blanc, a Viognier, Paul. Not many people know of that wine. It's a more fragrant white
I
wine.
like Viogniers.
originating from the Rhone Valley.
What would be one that you can reference? That you would like.
So
Viognier.
So both Fess Parker, Demetria have great Viogniers.
Okay.
Rhone Valley, there's a bunch of varietals. A bunch of winemakers there.
Now we're not talking about the Rhine, which goes through Germany and other
Rhine-
places. The Rhone in
In
France.
France.
Right.
In France. So I personally am not a huge fan of Viognier. My sister loves it, so when I get them in wine clubs, I just give them to her and we swap out. So
Oh,
she
that's
happens to love it.
Nice.
So any of those 3. And then when the main course comes, I think I always have both Pinot Noir and Chardonnay on the table.
Yeah.
People can just whatever they want. Many times.
As a follow-up from our show today, will we have some
Will we have
wine?
discounts for the wine here?
No,
codes
not
or anything?
discounts. Will we have actual tangible types of wine and maybe a couple suggestions.
You just
on
want it all
specifics.
spelled out. You just want
I
I'm going to
do.
go buy these 3
I do.
wines and I'm
yeah,
a hit.
sometimes I just want to be told exactly what to do because at the end of the day, I want to have a fantastic dinner and I want to pair it and I want everyone to be super happy. And you have great tips, and I'm always pleased. So it would be fantastic if our listeners that are following you can also follow your tips.
But it depends on the food, so you got
Sure.
to tell them.
That's what I'm saying.
If
So,
you
like,
have
scenario, we can talk about what we're doing today. Like if we were doing turkey cranberry stuffing, what would pair with that? What would be a great white and a great red, and then also what would like this.
So
Riesling.
That's a great point. I would encourage everyone to check out our Wine Wednesdays on our social posts because we will.
I didn't know
You
there
already
was
have
such
it.
a thing.
Because we will post
I'm gonna check it.
a meal. We'll post pairings. We'll post pairing options for
So you're
the
gonna
holidays.
do Thanksgiving specifically?
We'll do that first.
What day can I check this out on? Do we have
Ladies
it
and
already done?
gentlemen, Bart has just
Yeah, it's
on
Thanksgiving's
the
like
spot
in 2 days.
tailored our social media posting plan. Now we are doing specific meals on Wednesdays. You can check them out.
That's right.
I will let my team know ASAP.
Says our PR.
Got
That's
it.
called pivoting.
And here we go.
This is a marketing plan.
All right, last
in
question before you
process.
move on. Sauvignon Blanc. My wife has moved into. I never thought she'd like Sauvignon Blancs. I don't think she did for a long time. And another really light white. What do you think about Sauvignon Blancs?
So you are talking to a non-Sauvignon Blanc guy. Now,
okay.
I'm going to qualify that. So Sauvignon Blanc from France is called Sancerre, and that's from a region in France. I actually really do like that. Pretty much anything from the New World, especially, and this is my personal taste, so this is not meant to offend anybody, but from the hotter areas, the warmer areas like California and New Zealand, which is very popular for.
Real popular
I'm gonna
Sauvignon
give a
Blanc.
great positive plug for New Zealand wine in a moment, but for the Sauvignon Blanc, it's just too warm, and it makes a Sauvignon Blanc. And some people like this, but very grassy and
Yes.
bell pepper, and some
Right.
people love that, and that's just not my style.
And that's what they are up in Sonoma too. There's lots of Sauvignon Blancs, and they have that grassy, peppery kind of flavor to them. But Australia's huge. That's their.
I'm just gonna slightly correct you. The Sauvignon Blanc is gonna be more Napa, and Sonoma is gonna be more of the Chardonnays.
Okay, all right. That difference just going over the hill.
Yeah. So Napa is going to be more of your Bordeaux style
Exactly.
wines, and then Sonoma is going to be more of your Burgundy style wines.
Okay.
But for those who like it, I wouldn't pair it with the turkey course if you're for Thanksgiving or if you're having that for any of the other holidays. But for the salad or so forth, for people who like that, it's a great choice.
And you didn't put my other white wine that I used to always get my aunt to drink here, which you're going to throw up when I say because it's really cheap everyday wine, is Pinot Grigio.
Now, there's very good Pinot Grigios. Again, not my style, but there are very good ones. There's another great white wine that if you hear the name, you're probably going to think the same thing, but it's a very classy, when you find a good one, it's a Chablis.
Yes, right.
Back probably in your parents' day, Paul, that came out of a box.
Yeah,
and-
right. That's all they drank.
But it's
right.
true. I mean, that's what my mom drank, Chablis out of a box, and so I was always really against it. But Chablis is the northernmost point of Burgundy and the Burgundy zone, and it's actually a Chardonnay grape, but they don't use any oak in the fermentation. And it's if
What do
it's
they do? Steel barrels then? How do they avoid the oak?
steel barrels, and it has more of a gravel kind of texture or tone to it, and it's much more crisp. And if we're traveling to Europe or if we travel to like French Polynesia, which is a French province, it's very available. It's not as available here in California, at least at restaurants. It's a great choice.
Okay. All right. So there's your whites, ladies
All
and
right,
gentlemen.
so we're almost it's part of the white. So now, at least here in studio, we are going to go from, and
Okay.
hopefully you'll see the difference in color and in taste. We're going
So
to
if I were to
Chardonnay.
have,
And we're not going to wash out the glasses
Chardonnay.
and change them, everything. Oh my goodness.
So the best way to wash it out is to pour the next wine in it, swirl it, and you can toss it, and then
Okay.
or slug it.
Wow.
I'll toss it because I got to work all day here today.
Okay, so toss that. So Tish, you had a question.
Oh no, go ahead.
So look at the color difference. See how this one is
Oh,
like.
Yeah,
Much
there's a
younger.
big color
I like
difference.
Chardonnay, so I'm not gonna be biased. I'm gonna be biased.
How did
actually.
Chardonnay become the go-to wine? Was it?
Oh,
Sorry.
can't see.
Can I tell you one quick story here while you're pouring? I got
No,
a
I'm not
chance.
pouring very good.
I got a chance to meet the great Emelianenko Grgic, who I believe was the first
yeah.
winemaker to win an award in France. when everybody thought California wines were just box wines and would never compete with the real French. In a blind tasting, he did win back in the 70s, and he really perfected this kind of with lots of what has malolactic acid in it, which makes it have a buttery flavor to it. This buttery Chardonnay that became California's go-to signature. Maybe overdone here.
So all that is exactly correct, and it's a great winery. And I've seen him. I didn't meet him, but I saw him at the winery a few years ago when I was there. And the whole malolactic fermentation and the heavy oak, which was a big California thing, is really starting to kind of reduce.
Yeah, I think he sort of did it like everybody was just threw it in there, and that's a California wine. And that became the signature California wine, maybe because it was the first to win awards. But heavy oak, heavy malolactic, buttery Chardonnays. Oh my goodness, there's millions of them.
And in what we're drinking now, it does have some, I would say, some butter-esque texture to it, but not certainly not heavily. So this is
well, this has a lot of butter. I feel like I'm eating buttered popcorn here. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
oh, it's not that bad.
No, but I mean it's from the last
compared
one
to a Riesling.
Yeah, right.
For sure.
So
It's
this
still-
is
it's
a
Chardonnay.
2017 Chardonnay by Demetria.
Demetria,
Tell us
which
about
is
this wine.
also one. It's a beautiful winery in the San Ynez. A wonderful view. A great place if you're visiting to have bring a picnic. They're very accommodating there. And then very similar wine. Similar wines to the Fess Parker, but they actually are doing more in the Rhone as well.
Can Chardonnay grow anywhere? Because they do grow it everywhere in California, or is it better grown in certain types of climates?
It's going to be more in the cooler. So it is grown in San Ynez. It's less grown in Paso Robles, less grown in Napa, more grown in Sonoma, so a little closer to the ocean. Demetria is a relatively new winery. It's a Greek family that came in I think within the last 10 years and have done a really, really good job. I like this a lot, and I think it would be great with.
What would I pair it with, Bart?
Definitely, this is a Thanksgiving if you're going to have a
Or
traditional
buttered popcorn
turkey.
if you're having buttered popcorn. No.
Paul, that actually the best pairing of a buttery Chardonnay is buttery popcorn.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Wow, okay. I was
Good
just
job,
kidding.
Paul.
All right.
Good job.
I got one.
So,
And-
Paul, you can order this when you go to the theaters that serve
Yeah,
wine.
witness.
Amen.
This is.
Thank you,
I have
Sinopolis
never-
and
I know.
Or sneak it in your bag.
I have never heard of this winery before, and this is really spectacular. What kind of price range is this at?
This is in the 30 to 35.
Again,
So
you're not hitting me with. I thought you were going to bring in this unattainable stuff that I can't. What's the?
You haven't outpriced
Give
it
me a
yet.
couple of really high end California. I can't think of Hanzel. Is that one?
Tish and I had one at an event that we bought. Maybe somewhat unknowingly, that ended up being like $150 a bottle
Yeah. It was
for
amazing.
a Chardonnay.
It was amazing.
Benedict, that was a Sonoma. That
Okay.
was
a beautiful
yeah.
lady on the cover.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was So
Benedict.
delicious.
I still have a bottle or
Okay.
two left. Have you
I have
drank all
one
yours?
bottle left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is relatively affordable, and this is maybe for not everybody, but $30 a bottle. That's not out of.
It's really delicious. So, what would I pair this with? What kind of food?
So again, I mean, for holiday time, if something
Holiday, but in general.
just in general, this also is in my opinion, this is you don't need a food. I meant to reference this earlier, and that
You just like to drink. No
to
food
your
needed.
I meant to reference this to Paul's point about complementing food, and yes, a lot of wine does complement food, but there are certain wines that I think you can drink without food.
Yeah.
i.e. rosé all day. But there, and I think Chardonnay is also a wine that you can drink without having to pair with the food. In my opinion, the California Cabernets, I know a lot of people like to drink them by themselves. I personally cannot drink them without having a big steak or something.
Because it's got a lot of acid in it, and it needs
and the
something.
tannins that
Right.
kind of the meat helps to kind of cut it and offset it. But
I
on the
could
other
drink
hand,
this all day. I could drink
Okay,
this.
well,
It's
I've
sitting-
heard a wise tale that you would have whites or a Chardonnay with a fish. Am I wrong?
that is a
Like a white-
really
white
good
fish?
general rule of thumb. Chicken or fish, like
Okay.
a white meat, white wine,
Got
very
it.
very general. But
Okay.
what you accompany the food with or how you prepare the food, like for instance, I drink Pinot Noir with chicken all the time.
Really?
Okay.
One, because I think we're going to get into Pinot Noirs next, and I'll tell you the different variances of Pinot Noir. But there's a Pinot Noirs that are light enough in body that I think it still goes well with chicken, and or if you do chicken with I don't know, with a pasta sauce or some sort of a
I
red
see.
sauce.
Okay.
So or whatever accompaniments you might have with it.
So could I mix this during the holidays? So say, could I have this during the appetizers then? Again, it's light, snacky. It doesn't really matter really what I'm eating. And I can have
I would say
a
yes, as
Chardonnay?
long as it's not too heavily oaked. And I think, unlike Paul, I don't think this is overly buttery. So I
Okay.
could drink this all day.
I didn't mean to over. It just was such a giant contrast from
To the
other wine.
Riesling.
Yeah,
For sure.
And I do. This is maybe because I grew up in that era, the '80s and all this stuff. I love this kind of style wine. I understand why it put
You got
California on
Paul's
the map.
Christmas
I
present right
love
now.
this wine. This is my style. And I know it's been overdone, overblown, and they're paring it back, and there's fewer and fewer. But this is, to me, quintessential California wine. Little oak, a little bit of butter, spectacular flavor. I can drink this all day.
So I will share a story that almost qualifies as one of my most embarrassing moments, but I'll just embarrass myself again.
This is a good show.
Yeah. So we've talked about the oak and the butter, and which has been reduced, but at its peak, when Chardonnay was really, really buttery, there was a particular group of the population that really enjoyed this kind of wine. And this is a term that I did not create, but my master sommelier. And I actually announced this term while we were doing a client wine dinner, and I didn't realize how many people actually loved the wine. But the term referenced really heavily oaked, buttery Chardonnay, and he said, well, the people who really like that they call it cougar crack.
Oh boy! See, this is why he invited the publicist to the show.
That's
now I
right.
got to PR this situation.
That's right. We'll edit that piece out here.
I just
crack.
knew. Really? Oh,
It is kind of cougar crack, though. It's the older wild
Well.
woman looking for the.
Okay. Well,
I mean,
what's
what would
next?
this be without a little humor, right?
So we're going to move on to the next wine.
Yeah, let's do
Now,
that.
can I ask? I'll preface this with another quick story from Mike Gergich, the early one of the 2 or 3 famous early California winemakers that put California on the map. Mondavi, Gergich, some others. I met him in a wine tasting. This is like the late '80s, early '90s. He was still alive. And funny little man, a little beret. And so I had some of this really special buttery from some special year, '84 or something or whatever.
It was a good year.
It was a good year, and I'm holding on to this. Is that a good year? Is that when you were born?
That's
probably.
when I was born.
And I'm
You're
drinking
welcome.
wine tonight. And I'm drinking this stuff, and I go up to him because I was so concerned. I didn't have wine cellars. I didn't have controlled wine. You know, how long should I hold this? What I would do? What should I do with it? I bought cases of this stuff because I loved it so much, and I wanted it to last. I said, "What should I do, Mike?" He said, "You must drink it."
Let's move on to red.
Okay.
Okay, well,
And then
hold
let's
on.
also talk about maybe other
Can
meals,
I? Yeah, I
other
was gonna
holiday
say,
meals.
can I?
Yeah.
So, I'm not a giant traditional turkey stuffing kind of fan. I know, it's crazy. But what if we mix it up a little bit? So, what if we have like prime rib or tri-tip? What can I mix? What can I serve my guests?
Not
with
the
that?
last wine, because it would get overwhelmed by
Well,
it.
no. So Bart said I can do that for the appetizers and when people walk in. But what does it look like for the main dish? People are sitting down and they're gonna have tri-tip.
It's red,
What?
baby. You can have
well,
some
no,
red.
I know it's red, but what red would
Okay,
really
so-
complement that?
There's part of it's going to be personal taste, and part of it's going to be obviously driven by the type of food. So
Or enhance the flavor of
yeah,
the food.
so like that better be a sigh of like
This guy
pure
knows-
joy.
This guy knows what he's talking. Yes,
Are
this
you,
guy.
Did you try the Pinot? The Wol-
Can I
Pinot?
just stop you for 1 second here?
Right?
He's an ecstasy
really
over there.
close.
I got to
I
tell you,
love this
really.
wine.
So we've had 3 wines here. Okay, a Sauvignon Blanc, which a Riesling,
Riesling.
which I wouldn't have expected Bart to ever do. I thought he would put his nose up at all Rieslings and that kind of stuff because it's not as
I actually
Paul, what am I
sophisticated.
gonna do with you
no,
right
Paul,
now?
I actually agree with you because I thought the same thing with Bart.
I didn't think he'd
before.
go there at all.
But he loves Riesling.
That was really drinkable and
call.
really nice.
Yeah.
Then he hit my sweet spot, the old California's buttery Chardonnay, and as night and day different as that was from the first one, this is night and day different from that one. This is. Talk about this. What makes this so spectacular? Is it more depth of flavor? Is it more? There's more to this. It's got lots of stuff going on here.
Okay, let's
Right.
clarify what the heck we are even
Yeah.
drinking
Oh
right
my
now.
God.
So this is Walt 2000. what is
should
it?
be 16, I believe.
2016?
Yeah, 2000.
I never even heard of this one.
I
Another
actually
one
think
I
that's
never heard of.
2015.
It's a 15. Yeah,
Pinot
2015
Noir.
Pinot Noir.
So what
it's-
makes this so great?
I'm
And the other thing I'll say before you launch into that is I went to a Pinot Noir event in Brentwood a year or two ago, and I walked away thinking I don't know what Pinot Noir is. Some of them were light, some of them were heavy. There isn't I know what California Chardonnay tastes like, oaky, buttery. I know what Sauvignon Blanc tastes like. It's light and grassy or whatever here. I don't know what Pinot Noirs taste like. Are they still experimenting and trying to find what it is, or is it just a freer range of
You're
styles?
experimenting.
So there is actually a range, and I was referencing that earlier. Pinot Noir has light body, and then it has much full body. I am a big fan of the more full body, which is what we're drinking now. So Walt Winery is the kind of the sister of the Hall family wine in Napa. So Walt is in Sonoma. Catherine Hall is married to someone Hall. I forgot.
She could marry me. I'll get divorced. All right. This is good.
So her maiden name is Walt. So she named this wine after her father and her maiden name. So this is the wine they make that comes out of, this particular one's out of Gap's Crown, which is an amazing area for Pinot Noir. So pretty much any...
Gap's Crown, where's that? I never even heard
That's
of it.
one of the AVAs, one of the wine areas in Sonoma. Yeah, American Viticulture
Which
areas.
just to break it down real quickly, the powers that be have broken down, and this is an area because of the soil, because of the climate, because of everything. It grows a tendency. Wines have a certain style or a certain
Correct.
flavor profile that comes out of all this, right?
Right. So there's particular areas that have the more heavy, full body, which is what I really, really like, which is what this is. Other brands that I like are wineries. So Walt is amazing. Costa Brown is great, which is in the same area. Patinay, which Jim Fox is an ex-pro hockey player. He is kind of the brainchild behind it, but it's the same area, so the wine is coming out very, very similar.
You may have changed my mind because I've tried to like Pinot Noirs for years, and they're all over the place, and I have not found one I like. This may
Until
be the
today.
This may be the first one I've ever really
Until
liked.
today.
Yeah,
So
You've blown Paul's mind.
you blow my mind.
Mind
with this
blown.
one.
I feel like
Mind
that.
blown.
we
Yeah, no,
need
this
like a cheer.
Yeah, where's the
Paul,
confetti and glitter
we need,
again?
like,
What's
we
happening
need something here.
Where's
Woo!
Okay, there we go. Blew my mind.
So, and I'll tell you something that's kind of blown my mind. And I promised that I would come back to New Zealand, which is I know is a beautiful place. Tina and I and Tehan are going to go there in about a year to go visit. They're most known for their Sauvignon Blanc, which I've already discussed. However, the South Island of New Zealand is coming out with some amazing Pinot Noirs that are just like what we're drinking right
Really?
now.
I had no idea. Yeah,
Yeah.
most of the Sauvignon Blancs are in the North Island. There's two big islands.
Yeah.
And most of them are grown in the North Island, which is warmer, and the South is colder.
Yeah.
More
Pinot
mountainous.
Noir, if you've, for anyone who has seen the movie Sideways, there's a whole big thing.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to get back, Tisha, I'm going to go circle back because Merlot is an amazing wine, and it's going to answer your question here in a moment.
For
but-
food, yeah.
Yeah, but Pinot Noir was a big thing
I like
in the
food.
movie.
What can I say?
So anyway,
Amen. Enough said.
all
I
right.
like wine.
So we've talked about the kind of the different bodies. So when it comes to Pinot Noir, there's particular regions like Gap's Crown, Sonoma. Pretty much anything in Sonoma is going to be more full-bodied. Another area, and until New Zealand came around, about the only area that I thought I would like Pinot Noir from, other than this area, was Willamette Valley, Oregon.
I was going to say that's what they're known for up there because it's colder and whatnot.
And Chardonnay, so it's more similar to Burgundy in France. So pretty much anywhere you go in the world, they're mimicking the
Sister
old
location.
world.
But I went to the
And-
Willamette Valley, and I tasted all these supposed, but like Sideways, and I've been up to Santa Barbara where they were and stuff, and none of them wowed me. This is maybe the first one I've ever had that really wowed me.
We're
I
here
gotta
to
be
please
honest.
Paul.
Stick with
Yeah.
me. Stick with me, kid.
Man,
Oh my
you
gosh.
hit me. You said Pinot Noir, I'm like, next.
All right, so let's
Wow.
switch gears a little bit. So, Tish, you asked the question. Hey, what if I can do something less traditional, or maybe it's another
Yeah.
holiday? We're gonna do
Yeah.
some like heavy red
I
meat.
just
So,
want a nice dinner. Let's talk about if it was a prime rib or tri-tip.
so you definitely want to go with more full body. I mentioned earlier that I wouldn't drink a Cab just by itself, but Cabernet Sauvignon with a big red meat like that would be amazing.
What would be one? like one specific that you think? I know your taste that you think would be fantastic.
Yeah. So one of my favorites is from a California wine is Groth, Groth.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
They
Is
make
there
a great one.
specific year?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to drink one this year, you want to go at least back to probably 2015 or older.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is
And
it
that
true
way
that
it's-
reds have to, you got to hold them a while to really have a mature, whites are mature quicker?
That's exactly where I was going. Is
Yes,
it maturing?
that is true. There is depending on where the wine is from, your old world wines will last typically much longer than the Californians. I'm not exactly sure the reasons why, but I mean, there's European wines that could 30, 40 years old that are still drinking well right now.
Isn't that the tannins, though? The tannins sort of wear off over time, and they
I was going to ask
bigger
one more
tannins.
question on that. Is there a duration of time that, say there's a special wine that I love, 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 and then I just keep it? At what point is it too long? How do I know duration of like enjoying it, letting it age, and then it's just met its max?
Part of it's going to be the varietal. So Cabernet Sauvignons have a long duration. You can
Okay.
keep those longer. But there's a second part of that. There's
When you
another
say
factor.
duration, sorry, I just want to be more specific. You know me, I like numbers like 7 years.
Oh, you can hold
3
10 years or
10
whatever.
years.
20, 30, 40
Yeah,
years.
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But it's how you hold it. I think that's where he's going.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Yeah, so it has to be the right temperature. It has to be stored with a I know
Keep
no
the
one can see
cork
what I'm
wet,
doing, but the
yeah.
cork down so the cork
Facing down.
doesn't get corked and the cork doesn't like evaporate or into the wine.
Because then it opens up and then it breaks down and the wine.
Hold on
the
a
air gets
second.
in.
Wait, hold on a second. So my wine fridge at home is straight. Should I have it be tilting down and then
Oh, it
having
has
the
to.
cork?
It's got to stay. The
Which
cork,
one? Oh,
cork got to
that's
stay
it.
wet.
Hold on a
Interesting
second. No,
point
wait.
here.
Hold on
Put a little
second.
like thing on the back so it.
Your wine
So it
fridge
lifts it
has
up.
them
Thank-
flat. It's got to
No,
tilt
your
down.
wine fridge probably has a slight tilt. You
Oh,
don't-
does it? I
Yeah.
mean, I just
It should. Yeah,
have it
every
for it.
wine fridge would have to.
But it's
Because you don't want the
tilted.
cork to dry out. If the cork
Right,
dries out, then
right.
it breaks down, the air gets in, and it's a mess.
Okay, you have to understand, like the listeners and myself, I don't know this. So this is great information. We don't know. So how do you store it? You keep it at
A slight, just so
degree.
just so the cork is wet.
the cork is
Yeah,
wet.
so it doesn't need
and
much
that
of an
way it'll
angle.
last longer.
Correct. So yeah.
So I have a food
no
question
idea.
that I'm going to interject here. So I don't eat meat. Haven't for years. I love dairy, but I don't eat dairy. So typically during the holidays, I make a pasta dish, and the sauce is made from butternut squash that's pureed with garlic, and I always put in grilled shrimp. What
Wow.
wine would you put with that?
Yeah.
I feel like it's a Jeopardy now. Ding, ding,
I
ding,
know.
Ding,
Yeah.
ding,
I
ding.
trust no one more than
Ding,
Bart, so
ding,
I am
ding,
asking
ding,
this
ding,
question
ding.
to him.
That's
So,
a rough one.
I think a Pinot Noir would be great there. I think a Grenache, which is a red, which is a
okay.
lighter, less bodied, less full bodied.
There's a wine you never see anywhere, Grenache.
South of France is where it originates from.
I
I
know,
think that
but
would be
here-
a great one.
Go to a restaurant and order Grenache.
And rosé all day, baby. I think her
I love
rosé.
it. Now I have my 3 suggestions for this
See?
meal that
This is-
always
this
debuts
is so
this time of year in my
helpful, Bart.
household.
Can I
This
be
is
the only
great.
one in the audience who has a little bit of wine knowledge who's shocked that you even bring up the word rosé? Because that was like Chablis. That was my parents' box kind of wine. Rosé, Chablis, all that stuff.
So you need to you got to break out of that old world.
Blue Nun, whatever.
Now,
Dating
trust
you
me,
thing?
it
Age.
it was not easy for me to come out and say these things.
Yeah, right. It is coming out. Rosé is not something most wine snobs say, oh, please, let's have some rosé. That would be like
Actually,
they laugh
no.
at you.
The wine snobs and the wine professionals
They know.
these days, they know. Yeah.
So the people who are pretending to be wine snobs like me, you say rosé. Oh, please.
Oh, another great one. This is less known. This is in the most southern area of Burgundy, but a Beaujolais. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't. Okay.
Yeah. So it's a lighter red, but that would be amazing.
Where would you find that?
Okay.
What region?
Most southern part of the Burgundy region of France.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I want to make sure we have all these things going on. So, Tish, back to your thing. So, I also think a Zinfandel, a red Zinfandel, would be great because it's full-bodied, big, heavy tannins that will help cut through your tri-tip.
I'm
Oh.
a huge Red Zinfandel fan. Oh, my gosh. A
So if you don't like
Rombauer
it-
Red
yeah.
Zin. Oh my
Paula,
gosh.
you
I'm
and
a
I are
bio
in sync
bottle.
here.
Change
Yeah.
your life.
Okay.
So let me stop you for 1 second here. You hit my favorite of all times. I love Zinfandels, especially the ones from
Macy
Northern
Malphus
California
likes
that
that
have been around for 100 years, these old vine Zinfandels. And Zinfandel is one of those wines they really cannot determine where it came from, right? Zinfandel The best Miljenko Grgic would tell me was that it's from somewhere from what used to be called Yugoslavia. I forgot what, as it's all broken up, what part of Yugoslavia it's from. But is that correct? Zinfandel, as they've tried to chase it back, it appeared as a vine. It was given a name. Prohibition wiped out most of this stuff. They long since lost where the stuff came from. But as they've genetically tested it, Zinfandel seems to go back, at least according to Miljenko Grgic, somewhere in the Balkans.
So there's also something called Primitivo.
Yes, right.
I mean, genetically, they're probably all related somehow, somewhere. Paso Robles here in California is a big producer of Zinfandel. And Los Olivos, Santa
Up
Ynez.
in the north, where around the gold country and around where the original gold strikes were up in Northern California. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
The last, Tish, hey, how are we doing on time, Paul?
I'm open. We'll stay here all
Just
day
keep
if you want to
going.
stay here. I have a show at 4, so you can go 2 hours if you want to go here today.
All right, so hopefully people are still
Hanging in there.
We probably
It's
lost
super
everyone.
interesting though, because I think these are great takeaways. No matter what level you are with exposure
I
to
so
wine.
appreciate your knowledge and your
Yeah.
willingness to come in here. We normally do a half-hour show. We're up to an hour. You take whatever you want here. This is a great time.
All right, so there's another wine that I want to make sure it gets the proper credit for the right time, and that is Merlot.
Yes.
So Merlot, ever since the movie, way to go, Tish. I'm proud of you.
Let's just get a round of applause for Letitia Burbom right now.
That's one I got to go more.
All right, so Merlot was a great wine until it
Good.
From a PR standpoint, it wasn't when the movie Sideways came out. So there's a movie, and then there was a book. So for those who have seen the movie, they know, and I forgot the lead character's name, but he said, "No way, I'm never doing Merlot," and he hates Merlot. And so the country or the world took that as Merlot is a bad wine. Merlot is not a bad wine. It comes from Bordeaux. It's an amazing wine. If you read the book, the reason he doesn't like Merlot is because his ex-wife that left him loved Merlot.
Oh, that's it.
So he had-
Always a woman.
Ain't it the truth? Ain't it the truth?
So I am a huge fan. I will go for a Merlot over a Cabernet Sauvignon any day, hands down, whenever.
Over a Cabernet
Yeah, I
Sauvignon?
have seen you choose
I-
Merlot
Just the classic?
Yeah.
over. a
What's
Cab
your
multiple
favorite
times.
Merlot?
Dark chocolate.
What?
That's what it's called.
It's called dark chocolate.
Yeah.
Where do you find it? Who makes it?
I will
never
be
even heard of
looking
it.
for this tomorrow.
Yeah, it's from Napa, and I haven't got it in a while because I always look for.
Does it have any
Pinot
sort
Noirs.
of chocolate characteristic to it? Or is
Well,
it just
Merlot in its characteristics it kind of has like a chocolate undertone. So and it actually is great with chocolate. I would choose
Interesting.
that over a cab.
What year?
Gosh, you guys are killing me
Years
here.
are tough.
this
Forget
is
about
not what
years.
you do. We can ask. We feel comfortable.
Years.
So I go 2015, 2010 to 2015 probably. And so also Merlot is one of the everyone has heard of Bordeaux. So
Right.
Bordeaux. So who here thinks that Bordeaux is just Cabernet wine? No hands raised?
I kind of did a little bit.
Indifferent.
I kind of did a little bit.
You guys are just afraid to put your hand up.
I guess I
we're
would
not
have
sure.
thought, yeah.
Okay, so here in
It's
California,
the French version of Cabernet wine, yeah.
yeah. So in California, you have a Cabernet. It's pure Cabernet, which is probably one of the reasons that I don't tend to go straight for that. In France, if you get a Bordeaux wine, it is a combination of Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and then Cab Franc. And then you have left bank and right bank. I'm getting super like nerdy and technical. So on one side it's more Cabernet based.
have
On the
them
other
before.
side, it's more Merlot based. I go for more right bank because it's more Merlot based than it is Cabernet
Right bank
based.
of the Seine River, is that
I'm
what
like,
you're
what is
talking
right bank and left bank?
Oh,
Oh, right
river,
ba-
banks
Oh,
of the river.
got it.
about? Banks of the River. Now,
Yeah.
let me
Good
throw
question,
that.
Tish.
Let me throw that.
I wasn't sure either.
If they're not confused enough, the way they categorize wine in Europe, in the old world, is different from the way they categorize it here. They do it
Ooh,
by a
interesting.
region, and they do it by varietal. There, it is different, right?
So each region has different characteristics. There's like Grand Cru, Premier Cru, and that's in Bordeaux. Burgundy has their. That's Burgundy. Bordeaux has theirs. Champagne has theirs. Everyone has different characterizations, but they do rate them. And when you're in the elite area, like the premier cru, then you're going to get the top dollar and so on.
But they don't categorize wine by varietal. They don't just say it's one. I mean, a Bordeaux can be a blend.
It's by well, again, it depends. In Bordeaux, it's by the village, and then Merlot. I'm sorry, and then in Burgundy.
So let me ask you the really hard question. I've never come up with an answer for this. We're all, if you think you're a wine snob at anything, you're only going to drink a varietal. I'm going to drink Cabernet. It's 100% Cabernet. But there are blends that you can buy at every winery where the winemaker says, no, a little of this and a little of this. I think it'll be drinkable today and it'll taste better. Are you a blend guy, or is that just for the masses?
I go blend any day, hands down. Yeah, which is more like a Bordeaux. I'll do a blend over. And I just got introduced. I know it's been around for a while, and I'm on a list to be on the allocation Saxum. I'm not trying to plug it in, but I'm kind of plugging. It's out of Paso Robles.
And there's so little that they have to give out a certain amount to certain people?
Correct. Super expensive, but a great, and it's like 8 different, like Petit Verdot, Merlot, Zinfandel. It's an amazing blend.
Can I pre-order a Zinfandel through you? I'm placing my order.
What's the Argentinian varietal that they use to blend so much? Malbec.
Malbec.
Yeah. That's quite often. It's rarely do you see a Malbec on its own, but it seems to be a common. If they are going to blend, why is Malbec a good blending wine? Great.
Some people like my sister, my stepdad, they love Malbec by itself. I don't really care for it. It's more of a cutting wine to me. It's really high in tannin, but it just works great in the blend.
Okay, I have another question. It's completely off your notes question.
Yeah.
I enjoy great salads, and sometimes I have chicken, sometimes I have fish. Rarely I'll have like a steak with it.
Right.
What would be a wine that I can have at dinner? Now, typically for me, I'll do like a champagne or a Chardonnay, my personal preference. But in general, what will bring out the flavor of like a salad or greens?
Boone's Farm.
Oh, Paul.
Going back to the Davy,
another PR situation.
Going back to the Davy Crockett, Daniel
goodness.
Boone analogy. Do they even make Boone's Farm anymore? I don't think.
I
don't even know what that is.
No, you don't need to.
I mean, depending on if you want red or white. I mentioned the Beaujolais, which is harder to find here, but if you go to some of the higher end wine boutiques, a Beaujolais would be great.
Like an everyday salad. I want to have a delicious dinner at home every day. I'm not just talking about the holidays. Something I can enjoy.
Yeah.
Maybe
so my two
affordable,
go-tos, and I
wine.
eat a lot like you. My dinners are always a salad, and if I'm going to have wine with dinner, it's either a Pinot Noir or Chardonnay.
So it depends if you want a white, you would go with a
Chardonnay.
Chardonnay.
If it's hot outside, I'm going to do a Chardonnay. If it's cooler, like we've had the last few days, I go Pinot Noir.
Pinot Noir. Oh, so the weather dictates your choice of wine.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Puts me in the mood.
Huh. Okay, that's really great.
So the last thing on yours, a Syrah. I don't want to, spend too much time.
Did we talk about if I were going to have an Italian dinner?
So let's go there. So Syrah, if you're going to have the big heavy red, red meat again, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's another kind of with the Zinfandel and the Cabernet.
Yeah.
So if you're going to have a big Italian, my brother is married to an Italian, and so we go on Christmas Eve. She does a big lasagna with all the big red meat.
You're speaking my language.
I know.
Not the meat part, but the lasagna and the cannoli and all that good stuff.
Hey,
I know. I'll make you a cheesecake. Don't worry about it.
I never asked. Is Paula Italiano? I don't even know.
I
What...
am half. I'm Sicilian. That's why I'm spicy.
Now,
I know.
interestingly enough, I got to stop you for 1 second since we're doing this in slow motion here. We have several Sicilianos that come in and do shows here, and they constantly remind me, Sicilianos are not Italianos. This is
Scandalous.
Well,
Scandalous.
they're not
Yes,
Paula.
we are.
It is. I mean, it's part of Italy, but this is a different heritage. It has Greek. It has North African. This is a different breed of cat than.
Yeah, I see why they say that. I am still Italian. Don't let anyone fool you.
Thank you. All right, so
Any other final tips, Bert? You want to give us some wines
so
you
let's
want to make sure we address?
So one of my favorite nights of the entire year is Christmas Eve when we go to my sister-in-law's because she is a great Italian cook. She does her lasagna. She'll do big meatballs. That's my one night where I eat like lots of carbs.
I'm good. I'll wait.
More confetti and glitter just happened when you said that.
Hey.
So, and I will also tell you from a sommelier training, like Italy is the Achilles heel, at least for me, and most sommeliers will say the same thing because there are the regions are really small and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of varietals and regions. But If you're having like the meatballs and the red meat and all and so forth, so Barbaresco and
Getting hungry, by the
Nebbiolo.
way.
I should have brought something for us next
And
year.
those are wines you just do not see. Why do that make it into the common wine? You don't see Nebbiolo, you don't see Barbaresco.
I've never
Never
heard
even
of
these.
yeah.
I'm so
Tell
glad you
us
said
more.
this, Paula,
Yeah, these
because
are
you're saying
obscure
these things I
varietals
don't
only
know.
in Italian.
I don't know. Where are
dictionary.
these
Explain.
normal? Can I
So-
find them at my local grocery store? Where do I find these wines?
Part of I think it's where we live. It's regional. If you go to just like a supermarket, it's going to be California wines, right? Because we happen to live in a wine region.
My supermarket has everything. It's just broken down by region.
Then go to the Italian region. You'll find those wines there for sure. Those
Okay.
are some of the primary. Chianti is another one.
Chianti.
Okay.
Barbarello, Barbaresco, and these are all really big cab Zin style wines,
Okay.
big high tannic. My favorite of all the Italians is called a Super Tuscan. Paul, do you know what a Super Tuscan is?
When you showed me the list here before, it was the only one I'd never heard. I know of the Tuscany region of,
I'm like, I've been to
Italy, but
Tuscany. I
I'd
love
never heard of
Tuscany.
that as
They
a
have great
variety,
wine.
as a style of wine. No.
So I mentioned earlier, I like blends, right? If I'm going to go
Alright.
somewhere, I'm going to go blend. So
Yeah.
a Super Tuscan takes something that it's referred to as international varietals, and that's like your Cab, your Merlot, and so forth. So it's a blend of Cab, Merlot, Zin, and then it brings in also an Italian like either a Nebbiolo or a Chianti or something. And so the blend of that, I think that's my favorite. If
I've been
I'm bringing
having
wine,
spaghetti and meatballs or lasagna.
Now
Super
again,
Tuscan.
That's what I
Chianti,
want.
Chianti is one of those banished wines. White Zinfandel is
It'll
one.
bring out the flavor of my wine, of my food.
But these
Super
wines
Tuscan.
that have been that have been trashed through the years because my parents Chablis, White Zinfandel, and Chianti. Those all sound like cheap, just '60s wines.
No.
So Chianti
age
is-
doesn't have anything to do with it.
I mean, from
So-
a period of time when they just made cheap wine. Right.
So Chianti is in the Chablis era where
Right.
there was a bad marketing of it.
Right.
But the Chianti wine is amazing, and if you get a pure Chianti, it's fantastic.
I would never even try one because I would think it's just cheap wine, right? Because that
That's
was
so
the
interesting.
image I had.
That's what I enjoy being around
Yeah, that's what I
bars
enjoy.
when I go to places because I'm always surprised because it doesn't necessarily mean you have to get the most expensive
Right.
wine to pick great flavoring and pairing because I
That's
am
the truth. Yeah, that really
I
is
am
the
the
truth.
person at the grocery store or wherever I'm shopping, and I will look up the points, and I will say which will match.
You sound like me.
the
That's what
maximum
I do.
amount of
Do
points.
you know how many texts I get from her like, "Hey, should I get this wine for my dinner tonight?"
It's
It is
93
true, 'cause I
versus
wanna be
94
able to have-
points. Yeah.
And I love having wine that complements the meal, and it doesn't mean it just has to be natural and people enjoy and they're having a great time and it's just effortless. And so if you have a great wine that pairs with it, and I have learned so much from Bart, and that's why I ask these questions because these are great takeaways for everyone. And if you can enjoy, say you're having great company, and then if your meal is just so
What if
much
it's bad
better,
company? Then just give them some junk.
it's,
Yeah.
your meal
In
is
the
so
box
much
wine.
better, and then the wine makes the food taste even better, and you're enjoying it even more. It's just an even better experience. And so I am so thankful for you, Bart, always sharing with me, and I'm thankful for you sharing with the audience this information because it's great. It's great knowledge.
So let me ask
hope
you.
it's helpful.
What hostess doesn't want to be the hostess with the mostest?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
come on now,
I
right? Like we
know.
all want to have these incredible parties. So yes,
Yeah.
we're all ears, Bart. Whatever you'd like to share.
And so let me ask you the hard question because this is what I hear a lot when people. I have a little bit of interest in wine. I know a little bit about it. I never went and studied it like Bart did. And I start to tell friends or something, and they're like, "Oh, you're just one of those wine snobs. I just drink what I like." I said, "Good. That's really the ultimate compliment
Yeah.
here.
It's
Drink
your
what you
own
like."
preference.
And then experiment and expand your horizons. You know, I once upon a time when I was a kid in the Midwest, I ate Kraft cheese. That's all I thought was cheese flavor. Then I learned there's a million types of cheese out there, and it expanded my mind. What do you tell people who say at the end of this is too snobby, too sophisticated, too much work, too much effort?
No, I don't think any of the things he said are too snobby.
No,
We're
he's
just
done
talking
it.
about
I'm not saying the way he's
generality.
done it, but
Yeah.
wine in general has a connotation too sophisticated, too complicated, too difficult. I'm just not going to go there.
It is overwhelming. I do have to say,
Yeah,
when you
right.
you walk into a store and there's all these regions,
Billion
all
wines,
these
billion
flavors,
choices, billion.
You don't know where to go.
So
Paula.
So here's what I was going to say before the expert chimed in is put the ego aside and ask questions, which is
Yeah.
what we're doing today. We're
Yeah.
asking
True.
somebody who
That's true.
knows.
Great
Don't
point,
be afraid
Paula.
to ask a question.
And
That's
most
true.
of these wine, even like Vaughn's Pavilions, they have like sommeliers or like wine experts walking around. This is their life. This is what they love to do, and just
Yeah.
ask them. And yeah, I realized because I was once overwhelmed as well.
Yeah.
It's really tough. But at the end of the day, and I get this more so often, like. It must be so difficult for you to like to choose a wine and how is it? I'm like, at the end of the day, it's like, just pick what you like.
Yeah.
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 And like, so I bought some couple of very inexpensive and moderate priced wines and one that was more higher priced, but at the end of the day, it's just what we like.
You shocked me what you brought. You brought Fess Parker. I wouldn't think a certified sommelier would ever go near Fess Parker. You brought in wines that you tell me that you like Chablis. You tell me you brought in a dry Riesling. All these are things that usually my perception of wine snobs and wine experts
We're
would stay
blowing
away
your
from.
mind, Paul.
You're blowing my
today.
mind.
Mind
Paul,
blown.
you have-
Hashtag.
you haven't
blown
met
on
him-
this post.
As our clients might know, my
Boom.
favorite emoji is boom.
We're going to cheers to that. Cheers.
Yeah.
Happy holidays,
Happy
everyone.
holidays.
Yes.
So grateful for all these incredible tips. And Paul,
Yay.
we can't do this without you.
Yeah.
Well, I
Paul.
appreciate that you bringing in. I'm willing to open the doors and let. I hope people have stuck with us the whole time because it really is an amazing compendium of choices
time
and
has
stuff.
flown
And,
by.
and that's the idea: is to open your mind to it, not to overwhelm you and say, "Oh, I feel stupid. I don't know. I'm going to stay away from it." Jump in. The water's fine.
It's fun. It's fun to explore.
The
and
water's fine, but wine is better.
Yeah, exactly. Thank
Hey.
you, Bart, for sharing
Thank you,
all
Bart.
of your
Hey, this was
amazing
so
knowledge.
much fun. Thanks everyone for who has tuned in, and we'll look
Talk
forward
for
to
2
seeing
more
you.
seconds here because I got to get your music up here. All
And
right.
happy
Paul,
holidays.
happy
If you
holidays,
have questions, feel
everyone.
free to send in questions to podcast at bartzandbergen.com, or you
Tweet
can
us.
tweet us. You can connect with us on Facebook, Bart
DM.
Zandbergen. Send us a DM on Instagram. Find Bart Zandbergen or Letitia Burbaum. Otherwise, we'll be back
Somebody
next
tweeted
week.
in once, what's the number one question people ask you? So you obviously studied at an intense level wine, and you've shown today you know a great deal about it. What do ordinary humans like us ask you?
What's your favorite wine? Honestly.
And
just
what would
want
you
a
say
little
to them? You
piece
say
of
champagne
knowledge.
is just kind of a go-to thing that works with anything.
You know, we
Champagne
didn't
and
even
Burgundy.
talk about bubbles today, and that's
Yeah.
my favorite. And literally, that's one of my favorites because of you, Bart.
Yeah.
And I've been exposed.
What
to
do you
so many
hate?
great
What do you stay away
experiences.
from it? You say, no, that's just not me. Not
I
that
feel
it's
like
bad,
we
but
need
you
a
just
whole
don't like
nother
it.
podcast on bubbles.
I think we do, yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
I'm volunteering to come in again.
I
just so
will
you know.
too.
What do you hate? What do you
Bubbles.
not like?
There's no wine that I hate, but as I mentioned earlier, I don't go for Cabernet Sauvignon Blanc, a New World.
And as the world becomes more sophisticated as to wine, the Chinese market is huge. Other areas are opening up. What do you see? What's the hot wine? What's the new wine? What's the wine that's coming that hasn't gotten enough attention? Pinot Noir, maybe? I mean, Pinot Noir is certainly one that has gotten a lot of attention. It's on every wine list, but I just can't tell you what a Pinot Noir tastes like. Sometimes they're light. I can't depend on it. I go and order it. Oh,
It's
that's too
preference,
light.
though,
That's
don't
too
you
heavy.
think, Paul? This is preference.
Well, because there's certain styles we've come up with. We know what a Chardonnay, California Chardonnay is going to taste like, predictably. You know what a Cabernet is going to be big. You know what a Zinfandel is going to taste like. It's got lots of tannins and other things to it here. What's the wine that's coming up? Is there any hot new one that's coming up?
That's a great question. And straight from the publicist, you have to tune into at Bart Zandbergen on Instagram. Check in on our social media.
I'm trying to get it all in one session here.
All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you next week. Cheers.
Tune in next week for the latest edition of the Zandbergen Report, Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Catch up on our recent shows by visiting bartzandbergen.podbean.com. The Zandbergen Report is also available on iTunes, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Interested in being a featured guest on our show or have a question you'd like to hear us answer? Email podcast@bartzandbergen.com. Bart A. Zandbergen, CFP, and Letitia Burbaum, AIF, are registered investment advisors with Optivest Inc. and registered representatives with Gramercy Securities Inc., member FINRA and SIPC. Investment advisory services are offered by Optivest Inc. under SEC registration.
OC Talk Radio. Streaming, not screaming.
We're back here with Charlie Wright, who's had a show with us for 4+ years on alternative investments. And I'm just curious, what have you learned in that time, Charlie?
You know, Paul, it has been fascinating. We have interviewed, as you well know, because you've produced every single one of them here. Well, we have interviewed economists, newsletter publishers, authors, but primarily CEOs and chief investment officers and portfolio managers of investment strategies that are a bit outside the mainstream. And that's why they're called alternative investments.
Yeah, it's not the typical buy and hold stocks and bonds type of approach.
Right. And these interviews have just been fascinating. I remember Danielle DiMartino Booths. She's a gal from Wall Street, got a master's degree in journalism, started writing for the Dallas newspaper, and she was hired by the Dallas Federal Reserve. Then she worked for them for 9 years and then wrote a book. We interviewed her about the book. Fascinating stuff. She was there at the Fed in the crisis of 2008, and she has some great insights and opinions about what happened and about the economists there who had all these PhDs. But number one, they all signed up for groupthink, and that's what they do. You know, it's anointed at the top, and there's groupthink. And then they were typically unaware of what was happening in the real world.
Insights you couldn't otherwise get.
That's right. It was fascinating. And we interviewed another guy on that same subject of 2008. And he knew the 4 groups of people in The Big Short, the book and the movie. And I had read the book.
I think he worked for Credit Suisse.
Yeah, he did. Right? He did. And he knew them all and just had some great insights on what happens there.
Well, you know, I hear this over and over again. People go into it for various reasons. They want to brand themselves a thought leader. Look at who I know. Look at what I know. That's why a lot of show hosts get into this. Or they just want to create content for their website, for their social media. They can't write enough stuff, so by interviewing people, they create content for all those different channels. But one of the things, the unexpected things, is how much people learn along the way. Talk about that.
It's unbelievable. You know, as you're well aware, I do a pre-interview for typically about an hour, a week or two before the show, and then often we talk for 15, 20 minutes. So we learn so much, not just from the show's interview, but from those other things. For example, there are 3 sites that we have talked about, and they provide kind of a democratization of investing. Mm-hmm. And they take these investment managers who are not professionals, and they give them a strategy. Right? Yeah, they come up with a strategy, and then they have a site that confirms and verifies all of their trades.
And you can trade along with them if you want.
Yeah, that's right. And it's just fascinating to read the stories of and talk to these traders who do this, and they're living all over the world, many of them.
Well, you know, and it goes to the heart of what, again, is so special about your show, and that is that you bring forth people, ideas, strategies that I don't hear anywhere else, as it says in your tagline. Strategies you are not hearing elsewhere. You really do find these things, whether it's the books you mentioned or the unique platforms like Collective 2 or just the unique strategies. You're talking to top-level hedge fund managers, mutual fund managers that you, even as a sophisticated RIA, wouldn't normally get to talk to.
Yeah, that's right. And another example is I went to a conference, as you're well aware. They called us and asked me to come do podcasts at the conference. It was the second year that I did that. And I interviewed 12 investment managers at this conference. 3 of them, Paul, as you probably recall, have PhDs in engineering. One of them was from Stanford. Right. One was from Michigan State. I don't recall the third. They all 3 had careers in engineering and then left those careers or retired and started managing money.
Well, even beyond the fascination you obviously have for meeting all these unusual people here, talk about how you've actually used what you've learned. You've actually applied it, you told me, to some of your clients and have become a better investment advisor for them in the process.
Well, there's no question about it, because I'm inundated with all of these examples and stories and ideas. And for example, options. I mean, people see options as higher risk, but when you really understand them, they can be lower risk.
They can actually be a way to mitigate risk, as they talk about. It's hard for me to picture that, but they talked about it at length here. Well,
and then also, Paul, a couple of things, and I have you to thank for this. One of the things I always ask is, what keeps you awake at night? And you were the one who recommended that. Ask that
Yeah,
question.
because you got to get
very
past,
insightful.
You got to get past the script. I'm not saying our script, it's a script that they come in with. They've got an agenda of things that have been approved and discussed and polished, and that's great. We want to hear what their approach is, but we've got to understand something about them and how they think, and I think that question gets to the core of that. What keeps you up night?
It does. It does. And you know what's so interesting is you and I noticed it was early 2016, so we'd had the program for a couple of years. And when I asked that question, you know, we got a variety of answers, but starting early in 2016, we kept getting the same repeated answers. The world geopolitical situation.
The chaos
over
of the
and
world.
over.
Right.
That's right, over and over. So, Paul, we look forward to offering this. It's intriguing, it's interesting to audiences, and look forward to it. And thank you for producing the show and helping in a variety of ways.
Well, it's been educational for me as well. I had no idea. When you walked in the door and said you were going to talk about alternative strategies, I thought you meant gold or coins or baseball cards. I didn't know there were so many sophisticated ideas that I guess weren't accessible to the average person like me, and you've brought it out. So I appreciate the education I've gotten and the information that you've been able to uncover and bring out to the world as a whole. A fascinating show. It's certainly taken off in ways we never imagined, and certainly grown to become much bigger than anything we could have envisioned in the beginning here.
Thank you, Paul, and we look forward to many more.
Hey, welcome back. It's time for another episode of the OC Spotlight, the one show that takes a look at the most incredible people doing the most amazing things right here in your own backyard. And today, well, guys, you want to listen up on this one, because this is something that, I don't know if it just affects guys, but it's certainly on our minds as we get older here. We're talking about a serious subject, but a positive, unique way to handle that serious subject. We're talking about prostate cancer. Yes, don't turn off your tunes yet here. We got some hope for you here if you've experienced any of that or the fear of it or are wondering about how to treat it. We've got some experts in the house today here, starting with Dr. Robert Pugash from the Pacific Coast Urology Center right here in Orange County. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Why do I always have to call doctor sir? See, I'm dating myself here. A doctor is somebody we look up to, we respect, and you certainly have achieved a lot. Tell us about the Pacific Coast Urology Center overall before we get into the specifics of what you're doing there.
Well, Pacific Coast Urology Medical Center is over 30 years old. I've been practicing urology for about 34 years now. And several years ago, we also formed an organization called Western States HIFU to help guys deal with prostate cancer. And it is focused on minimally invasive or non-invasive ways of treating urological conditions, so we avoid large surgical procedures, we avoid the side effects and complications of many of the older therapies, and allow guys to have treatments that really have minimal interference with normal life and getting back to normal activities quickly.
I can't think of any surgery I would fear more than prostate cancer here. My dad, my late father, suffered from it. So many men do. It's something that we're more likely to experience the older we get? I'm in my 60s here, and my doctor's always saying, oh, we better test for that every year here.
It's good that your doctor says that. You're right, it does happen as we get older. But interestingly, the youngest recorded case right now is in someone who is 33 years old. So we seem to be diagnosing it at earlier ages. The question is that because we're better at diagnosis, or is there something in the environment that is causing that? And I think it's probably a bit of both.
Okay, so when it appears, the normal procedure is what? You go in and operate on the most sensitive part of a man's body here.
We do, but we have to back up a little bit. The first issue is how to find out if you do have prostate cancer.
Okay.
And September is actually National Prostate Cancer Awareness Month. It has been that for decades. And it's a way to encourage guys to come in and have appropriate testing to see if they do have prostate cancer. And there's two things that need to be done. One is a blood test called a PSA, or prostate-specific antigen. And it's an imperfect test. If it's not normal, it doesn't mean someone has cancer, but it means there's a possibility. But there are other causes that make it abnormal. And in addition, we need to do an examination of the prostate called the digital rectal exam, which most guys shy away from. But it takes,
just the name of it scares me here.
well, at least it's digital, not analog. But it takes about 5 seconds to do. And the reason we want to do that is many prostate cancers have normal PSA blood tests, so we could miss them if we didn't do an examination.
Because that's normally what they do. What's PSA stand for? I don't even remember. But somehow you got to get a PSA test, and if it's up above a certain level, you're in risk of having prostate cancer.
Exactly. Actually, it's not a very good name. Prostate-specific antigen, number one, it's not specific to the prostate, and two, it's not an antigen. Otherwise, it's a great name. But nevertheless, it's the best that we have right now, and it does allow us to diagnose a lot of men with prostate cancers at an early stage when they're easily treatable and curable.
So, again, the normal process is what? You go in, I hate to even say the word because everybody will giggle, but it's you take your penis and you stick something in it there and clean it out. My dad crudely described it as a rim job or something, or he went in there and just cleaned it all out here. It was horrible.
Well, what you're describing is the old Roto-Rooter procedure.
Yes, right.
And that's actually for something else. That's for the benign growth of prostates that cause us to wake up at night, to urinate and give us a slow stream and maybe leak some urine.
Right.
This is different. This is prostate cancer. And actually, one of the problems of prostate cancer, one of the challenges, is that it doesn't give us any of the symptoms that we see with traditional benign prostate growth. So it's a silent cancer. And oftentimes...
So you're not experiencing, typically they say suddenly there's something blocking the flow. You can't pee very well here. It's hard to go at night here.
Exactly. And so because of that, that's why screening is so important, because if we wait until there are symptoms, which oftentimes is bone pain because it's spread to the bones or other structures, it's too late.
And too late means you die.
It means that you can't be cured from cancer. And in the United States this year, we're going to lose about 32,000 men to prostate cancer death.
See, I find that amazing. It's similar to what my wife always talks about with breast cancer. It is something that is easily, not all cancers are that, but there are some that you can detect and get at early. And if you get to them early enough, the chances of survival are high, right? But we don't do it. Is it just because we're afraid to know? I kind of fall into that category. If I don't know, I can't be sick.
I think guys are a lot more reluctant to find out if something is wrong than women. I think women are much more proactive when it comes to health issues. A lot of the guys that I see in my office are there because women have said to them, I want you to go in and get screened.
Yeah, right. And guys are tough, and there's nothing wrong with me. I'm okay, and I'm just going to gut it out. And so I don't know if it's the little kid in us that doesn't want to know or the big adult that thinks we're tough and strong and brave and don't want to do it. Or is it the fear of having to do this? I mean, you're going to have to operate on something that I don't really want anybody to touch and operate on here. That sounds horrible to me. So the idea that you guys have come up with is what? You've come up with this, you call it HIFU, which sounds like a Japanese acronym, but it really stands for High Intensity Focused Ultrasound. Ultrasound you're using to, does it dissolve it? Does it break it up? And how does this work?
Well, it's interesting that you said it sounds like a Japanese acronym, because the urologist who first taught us that we could use HIFU for prostate cancer was Professor Uchida in Tokyo.
See, I knew that.
He's a very wise individual, because HIFU was actually invented for benign prostate growth, but he taught us back in 1999.
Benign meaning it's not growing anymore. Is that what? Define those terms. I know they're always saying benign, or I forgot the other term that's growing.
So non-cancerous is probably a good definition of benign.
Okay.
But it is a growth. So he taught us that we could use this for prostate cancer. And one of the challenges with prostate cancer is, number one, is you just alluded to, getting guys in to be tested because of concerns about the effects of treatment. And two, the effectiveness of the treatment. So the traditional ways of dealing with prostate cancer have been either radical surgery, and radical is always a scary word.
Yeah, right.
Or various forms of radiation. And with radical surgery, at a minimum, guys have a 35% chance of permanent urine leakage afterwards.
Oh, my God. And
So,
how about the other one? Maybe I'm being too scary here or something, but guys are so frightened of erectile dysfunction and not being able to be, this true guy. Does that affect any of this too? I mean, are we damaging your your gear? I don't know how to describe this in a polite way here.
Gear is an interesting word, but we'll go with that. So let's say there's
I'm an automotive guy. I got to think of everything as gears and functions.
well, let's say there's a 50 to 90% chance of gear malfunction afterwards. And
Yeah.
that's permanent. That's the problem. So we
Yeah,
may joke
right.
about it a little bit, but stop to think about facing a treatment that, yes, could cure your cancer, but for the next 20, 30, 40 years, you're wearing pads or diapers and you can't have any intimacy.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
huge, which has caused a lot of guys to look for alternatives.
Yes.
The more traditional ones being some form of radiation. And radiation comes in many different forms, from protons to seeds, to something called a gamma knife or cyber knife. There's about 7 different types.
And the thing, I'll stop you there for a second, because somebody described this once and I thought it was an effective way. And I hope this doesn't offend you because you're a doctor. But it seems like we're using radiation of some sort to treat most cancers, to try and what does it do? It attacks them, it breaks them down somehow, or whatever. It destroys them in some sense. But it's like using a sledgehammer to get out a sliver. I mean, it's not very focused. You're trying to get something. You're over radiating the section of the body, and that's what makes people so sick.
In large measure, you're spot on. Certainly in the pelvis, where prostate cancers live, because of scatter radiation and because of the fairly wide field that we treat, we can damage other structures. And it's hard to get enough radiation directly into the prostate to give a permanent cure. So the recurrence rates with radiation can be quite significant. And the problem is, if radiation comes back, prostate cancer comes back after radiation, we don't have any good answers. Jerry Brown, our last governor, was a good example of that.
Yeah.
Jerry's prostate cancer was diagnosed in 2012. 5 years later, his PSA was going up. He had biopsies showing more cancer, and he said at the time that he was going to have more radiation, but that wasn't true because you can't have more radiation. We give you the maximum dose. So if you have surgery after radiation, you have no control of urination. It just pours out and you're in diapers all day long.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
So you end up going on a medication that takes away all of your testosterone. Imagine waking up every morning without testosterone. You don't want to get out of bed.
No, exactly.
There's no energy. There's no focus. So
My.
radiation that fails is a terrible situation, which is why treatments like HIFU are such a wonderful alternative now.
Okay, so you scared me about the traditional way. Give me some hope for this new technology. Is this something that you guys are pioneering? Is this something that you do unique here in Orange County, or has this become an accepted alternative to a widespread alternative to traditional invasive surgery?
Going back to 1999, when Professor Uchida said we could use this for prostate cancer, little by little it's been accepted throughout the world. And over the decades that ensued, dozens and dozens and dozens of countries adopted the treatment of HIFU. We were kind of late to the game in the United States for a variety of reasons. Our FDA took a while to approve it, and it wasn't until late 2015 when they said it was okay. And
Wow,
we were
recently, okay.
We were at that time, I believe, the 46th country to adopt it. So
They seem to lag in lots of things. I don't know specifically, but they're always saying there are alternatives available in other countries, and people sometimes go to, I don't know, Canada, Mexico, someplace or whatever, to seek treatments that we still haven't accepted here that do work and are accepted in other places.
And indeed, that's exactly what I did, and not a lot, but several other urologists did. So on a monthly basis, we would literally leave the country and travel to Canada, Mexico, the Caribbean, Europe, and treat our patients. They would fly with us. We would treat them and then come back with them because we were not allowed to do the procedure here. And so I started doing this almost 15 years ago and have amassed a fair amount of experience now. And it's been a lot of time spent working with the folks, the engineers who make this equipment to help them improve upon it and get it to the point where we have a pretty amazing technology today.
All right. Well, your partner in this process here has been silently sitting here and listening to all this. Let's welcome him in for a moment. Ross, and is it Balson? I forgot to ask.
Bolson.
Yep. Bolson, okay.
Yep.
Say it real quickly. Bolson.
Yep.
You do what? You're you're on the HIFU part of it. You guys somehow produce the equipment to do this?
We actually bought it from the manufacturer. We own it in conjunction with partners, and we provide it for our physicians to be able to use to treat patients.
And is there anybody else in Orange County doing this, or are you the lone pilgrim in this process here? I mean, I was for the doctor's sense. Are there lots of doctors doing this now, or is this still pretty unique to what you're doing?
I think it's safe to say we do 99% of the HIFU.
Okay. Now, let's talk about HIFU, because I like the idea, high intensity, but focused, because that's what I fear about most cancer treatments. It's a sledgehammer. You're going to not just go after the small section where this cancer growth is happening, but you're going to radiate everything, and I'm going to get sick and damage and problems. Talk about the high intensity focused ultrasound that you use. What is it? How does it work?
Okay, so instead of getting the scatter that you get with radiation, and a good example of that is if you ever look at a drop of water as it hits a puddle, you'll see the radiating droplets. That doesn't happen with HIFU. HIFU takes an energy beam, initially shaped like a triangle. The base of the triangle has a lot of diffuse energy, and the phenomenal software and transducers that we have will then focus that to the top of a triangle, and that's where the heat is produced. If you think of what you might have done as a child, where you're outside on a sunny day with a magnifying glass
That's
and a leaf.
exactly what I was going to suggest. You're taking a magnifying glass, you're taking the light, and you're focusing into this beam, and you're burning something, a leaf or whatever.
Exactly, but you're not burning anything in between. And if you put your hand under the magnifying glass, it wouldn't get hot.
That's true. Yeah, I've never thought about that. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Well, this does the same thing. So it passes harmlessly through tissues until it gets to the area that you're aiming for.
Because it's finally, when it's focused, it's that end of the beam that gets hot. It's not the accumulated top of the funnel here.
Exactly. And the top of that triangle is approximately the size of a grain of rice. We can actually move that grain of rice within fractions of millimeters. That's how precise this is.
Wow.
And so
I'm not over radiating. I'm not over burning. I'm not over attacking the rest of the body here.
You're treating exactly what you are focused on and nothing more. Now, that can be the entire prostate if there's a lot of cancer throughout the prostate based on biopsy results or an MRI. That can be half of a prostate, a quarter of a prostate, the size of a pea area within
How big
the prostate.
is the prostate? I don't even know.
It varies. When we're at age 25.
It's like, what, a gland or something?
Yeah,
Or?
it's the prostate gland. Really what it is it's for reproduction. It's a common channel for urine and for semen.
Okay.
Once we're past our reproductive years, it has no particular function. And at age 25, it's roughly the size of a walnut. And little by little, it starts growing, and it can grow 10%, 50%. It can grow to the size of a grapefruit in some people.
Oh, my goodness. Yikes. Burn it? Does it dissolve it? Does it break it up? What does it do with that focused end of the beam here?
Every 3-second burst of ultrasound energy will raise the target temperature to somewhere between 90 and 100 degrees centigrade. So we are superheating the tissue, and there are no cells of any type, be they cancer cells or benign cells, that can withstand and survive that kind of heat.
So you're breaking it down. You're dissolving it. You're destroying it. It disappears. It breaks
Well,
up.
we're destroying it, but it doesn't disappear. So after each 3-second burst, we have an area the size of a grain of rice that's now dead, that there's no viable tissue in there.
Okay.
Little by little, that goes away. Either when somebody urinates, little pieces can come out, or the lymphatic system will digest that and excrete it. And at the end, the area that we've treated is just a cavity. It's gone.
I got to think about that image, because that just seems so amazing and so obvious, as opposed to going in with a knife and trying to cut it out, or going in with dangerous radiation and trying to kill it that way. It seems so much more logical to focus your energy, focus your beam on a small part. And you're doing this through the body. So am I correct? There's no incision, which means there's no blood loss?
Zero. And there is no incision. So we're able now to move forward with technology. In the old days, when surgery was all that we had, that's what we did. We advanced from large open operations to robotic surgery, but it was still surgery. It still is surgery.
Right.
We've gone through all these different types of radiation. But what you've seen is, because of the recurrence rates with radiation, because of the side effects of surgery, guys have reluctantly said, I don't really want to know if I have prostate cancer. And many have said, if I do have it, I don't want the treatment.
Yeah. No, that sounds unbelievable, but I know, guys, I might fall into that category myself here. The treatment sounds even though you're going to die, I don't know why. It just seems so horrible, so awful, so many side effects, so many downsides that you just can't deal with it.
I don't know any urologists, myself included, who do not have patients whose cancer we cured 20 years ago, but they've hated us ever since because of what we've done to their lifestyle.
Yeah. Right.
Now with HIFU, that changes. Now you have something that allows someone to have their cancer treated, cured, and they move on with the rest of their life. And my family is a good example of that. I had a very close family member 12 years ago with prostate cancer who had HIFU. 12 years later, he's cancer-free and everything works. And I followed in his footsteps. 2.5 years ago, when my prostate cancer was diagnosed, and I was sure I was going to get it because a family member had it.
Yeah, right.
So my risk was higher. When my cancer was diagnosed, I had my HIFU treatment. The day after treatment, I was on an airplane flying home. The following day, my wife and I just took it easy at home. The next day, we were on a plane to the East Coast for a family event. No pain, no downtime.
Because there's no incision. The incision as we get older is what it's hard to recover from here.
Sure is.
Okay, so you went through this yourself. What did your friends say in the industry? Come on, the other people who follow your profession here.
Well, one of the unfortunate things some of them said was, gee, maybe I should be tested for prostate cancer, because docs think we're immune from things sometimes.
Yeah, right.
So,
You're Superman.
yeah, so some of them fortunately did get tested. Some of them I know had radical surgery and had the side effects of surgery. There is another physician who also works with HIFU Prostate Services who did what I did. We're a part of a group of docs who have had cancer and had HIFU treatment for it because we believe in the technology and know that it works.
So why buy the technology? Was it because I'm sure there was an economic opportunity here, you can sell it to others, or was it something that you wanted to perfect and make even better? Or you couldn't get access to the equipment, so we got to do it ourselves? Well, what led you into producing this other company here, which is HIFU Prostate Services, the company that actually makes the equipment?
Actually, HIFU Prostate Services is a company that purchases machines from the manufacturer,
Okay.
and then they set up individual centers throughout the country. They're the largest provider of HIFU services, I think, in the world right now.
So you're like a distributor of the equipment, or
I'll let Ross answer that.
I say more of a service provider than a distributor. A distributor is actually selling the product on, and we're actually owning the equipment and letting people rent and use it.
so they lease it from you? Because I'm sure it's
Correct.
not cheap. All these
No, the
pieces of
machines.
equipment.
Yeah, the machines are quite expensive, and that made it cost prohibitive for people to buy into them. And so, nobody wants to pay for a big expensive piece of equipment on their own typically. And so, we found
and
we
maintain
partnered
it
with
and
them.
train them
Correct.
and all the other stuff.
Yeah, so we provide all the technical services behind it and the financial services behind it that go along with running a piece of equipment and running a small business. Each one of these little pieces of equipment is basically its own business unit.
Give me a rough idea what they cost ballpark here.
Ballpark, you're looking at about $500,000.
Oh, for one little piece of equipment.
Yeah.
And how big is
And
it? I don't know what it looks like. Is it?
It's it's the size of I would say it's the size of a small refrigerator turned on its side.
Okay,
It's,
that's,
it's
that's pretty
big.
Yeah,
it's
right.
big. It weighs about 300 pounds. It's not like it's something you could throw on your.
And it has some sort of
hatchback.
mechanical arm. I'm trying to picture what it looks like.
Yeah, there's actually a couple pieces involved. There's the big computer system, which is a giant box with a keyboard and a screen attached to it, and then the actual arm itself is attached to the surgical bed, and that is sort of a robotically controlled piece that's in contact with the patient, and that's where the transducer is that the sound waves come out of. And
no
provide the
pain,
therapy.
no problems. This isn't have any other side effects or symptoms that we should be aware of here?
At this point in time, the answer is no. In the early years, we had all kinds of issues, and we worked through those, and as the technology got better and better, we saw patients having experiences like I had. And so when you look at a surgical procedure and you say that the minimum risk of leakage is 35%, with a HIFU procedure, it's between 1% and 3%.
Wow.
When you say that the chance of erectile dysfunction after surgery is 50 to 90%.
50 to 90%. Okay, another reason everybody's afraid to do this. But under your process,
it's 1 to 5%. And so the average person walks away without cancer, dry, potent, and moves on to the next chapter of their life. You asked before about why I got involved with this. Pacific Coast Urology, when I founded it, was founded on the concept of minimally invasive treatments for urological conditions. I started years ago doing a freezing procedure called cryoablation for prostate
I've heard
cancer.
that. I was going to mention that one, yeah.
And in its time, it was a good procedure. We still do those occasionally. But like most things, you have to kind of look at what's available and say, we've evolved from freezing, we've evolved from radiation, we've evolved from surgery into something now that we can offer patients, and so that they won't be afraid of having a diagnosis made, and equally or more importantly, won't be afraid of having a treatment now.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I just focus on the word focused, because even freezing or radiation seems like you're just treating an entire region to get at one specific small spot. Whereas with this, it sounds like, if to use that magnifying analogy here, you're magnifying a beam of light on a very specific tiny part that just seems like so much more logical. You're targeting the area in a much more focused way.
You are, and that also raises another interesting issue with HIFU that's not applicable right now, but there are literally 101 proposed uses for HIFU now.
What? Really? For other things they can treat or attack or something here?
Yeah, there are clinical trials underway in this country and in China for breast cancer. It's been proposed for thyroid cancer. It has been used for deep brain stimulation for patients with seizures.
Oh, wow.
Instead of having an invasive brain procedure.
Yeah,
can be
how
done
else
from
do you
the
get
outside.
at it? Right, exactly. Particularly like, don't they do that with Parkinson's and stuff here? They're trying to go in and they're actually trying to, there's some, I know Michael J. Fox talked about it a lot. He had some controversial procedure where they actually went into his brain and, I don't know, cut something, did something, but it...
What most people have had in the past, as you're describing with him, is they've had an implantable device put into their brain.
Right.
Now, literally, and this has been done in many, many, many patients, some of whom I have met, you just aim a HIFU beam in an area, destroy that focus where the seizures are coming from, or the Parkinson's focus, and you have pretty remarkable results. So HIFU is in its infancy when you look at other areas, but it is a absolutely accepted treatment now here in Europe and so many other countries.
Are there lots of manufacturers? Are there lots of people what you're doing, or are you pioneering this whole process? It's not, because it was only approved a couple of years ago here in this country.
Right. There are two manufacturers. There's a French machine, and there is a machine made in the U.S. by Focus Surgical. Most of us here feel that the U.S. machine has superior technology, which is why we use that exclusively. We continue to see improvements little by little as we treat more and more patients with this.
So, Ross, where do you think this goes? You've obviously bought into the program and become a partner in this thing, taking this equipment and getting it widespread use, overcoming the economic obstacles, making it affordable for everybody here and supporting them and teaching them. Is the community embracing them? Are they still... We always think of doctors as kind of, I'm sorry to say, kind of stuck in the whatever last technology is, you know.
That's you get that with, there's always going to be an early adopter side of the physician, and then you've got the rest of the people that sort of follow along later. And so we're still, I think, in our infancy at this point. It's just going to grow from here, and it's been growing from here every single year, year over year. We treat a lot of patients every single month. We've got, we're nationwide. We've got machines spread out across the country. We've got a couple here in Southern California, and it continues to grow every single year, and more physicians get involved every single year. And the nice thing about the machine is it doesn't know who's sitting down at it, whether it's Dr. Pugash or
me
or Dr. B, whoever might be the next person.
Exactly.
And it's a repeatable process. And, we use doctors like Dr. Pugash who have a lot of experience to proctor the other guys because, it's a repeatable process. And obviously it just takes experience, and you're dealing with years of experience. Dr. Pugash was offshore for years doing this and has a lot of experience. And so we can tap into that here locally or around the country. We have physicians actually fly in to Southern California to actually watch him provide this service to the patients, to understand, how to talk to their patients about it and provide it in their markets.
And how to use it. It's a tool. It requires some training, and it's probably something. How about medical schools? Are they embracing this yet, or are they teaching this? When I don't know where you go to. I don't know where, for example, Dr. Pugash studied, but it must be some place you go to learn to be a urologist here. And
so that takes it to the residency level after medical school. And once treatments like this become accepted at the university level, that's when you start teaching residents about it. So we have universities throughout the country now, from the East Coast in New York to several sites in the West Coast and many in between, that are now providing services like HIFU, and as a result, the residents are being exposed to this, and it gives people like me a chance to go there and help them understand how to use this a little bit better.
Well, hallelujah, because I'm of the age, I'm in my 60s here, and prostate, just as women fear breast cancer, men fear prostate cancer as we get older. And I'm sorry to say I probably don't have it tested often enough, because the alternative sounds so horrible and so awful. I somehow want to stick my head in the sand and say, I don't want to know. If I don't know, I can't be sick. That's not the correct way to approach life here. And if you made it as you have, not as frightening, not as fearful of the results, not as invasive, and much more focused, I breathe much easier and be much more willing to find out earlier what I've got and address it here.
Well, Paul, don't take this the wrong way, but I look forward to seeing you in the office.
Yeah, no, I think so. I appreciate it. Where do we go? How do they reach you? And how do they get more information? Let's start with your clinic here locally. Make sure I get this right. What's the name of the clinic here again?
So there's a couple of great sites to go to. There's Western States with an S, HIFU, HIFU.com, which is very rich with content.
Okay.
From patient interviews.
That's what we want to learn about the process and the technology.
Yeah,
right.
And just great patient comments, including a great focus group on guys who'd had the procedure and talked about it afterwards together. And also Pacific Coast Urology. .com has information about HIFU as well as many of the other services.
And that's
we
your
offer.
clinic where we can actually get this treatment.
Across the street, yeah, we do it at a surgery center.
Right, but through this facility. And then if, I don't know, we're a business channel, we have lots of investors. I don't know if you're looking for next rounds of money or anything here, but if they want to know about the technology itself and this way that you're providing this service to other physicians, how do they learn about HIFU prostate services?
Well, you can go to our website, HIFU Prostate Services, or you can call us. We've got an 800 number if you find it on there. And call our office and just talk to us about it. We actually have nurses as well on a nursing line. So if somebody just has a clinical question and wants to understand, or maybe they're watching this or listening to this online in some other part of the country, they can call our 800 number and talk to a nurse, and they'll direct them to somebody local in their community, or if they want to fly back home and see Dr. Pugash, they can do that too.
And again, all of these to me just overwhelm me. On one level, they sound so fantastic. It's hard to take it all in. But that's what technology does for us. And I'll give you a classic example. Both my father and my mother and my aunt all have passed away in their 90s a few years ago. But many years ago, my dad had his, what's the thing that typically bursts and it doesn't have much function in your body here?
Appendix?
Appendix. He had his appendix. I couldn't think of the word. He had his appendix out. Oh, my goodness. It was just horrendous. It was like, invasive, and it took him forever to recover. And a couple of years ago, before she died, my aunt had it done, and they just stuck a needle in and blew it up and dissolved the thing. And it was an outpatient surgery. So what seemed horrible 20 years ago became almost minor and routine due to technology. It sounds like you're moving in that same direction.
We are. And I just want to mention one thing. When you asked how to contact us, and Ross mentioned the phone numbers, ours is 844-HIFU-DOC, D-O-C.
And HIFU is just like it sounds, H-I-F-U.
Just like the Japanese spell it, yes.
Okay. It's not a haiku, it's a HIFU here. All right. All right. Well, thank you for coming in. I applaud you for what you're doing. I welcome that there's a non-invasive, easier, less intrusive, less problematic way to deal with what we're all frightened about. And I hope that we all learn from that, and me included, go get yourself tested here and find out. There's no reason to avoid this anymore. Technology has taken us places that we couldn't imagine a couple years ago. All right, thanks so much for coming. You've heard another one here on Orange County's only community radio station, bringing you the most interesting stories right here in your own backyard. Right here in Orange County's only community radio station, OCTalkRadio.net.
With more than 25 years of experience, BART's comprehensive perspective has earned acclaim from clients across the globe. Gain access to lessons learned throughout BART's career by following at Bart Zandbergen on Instagram. To learn more about Bart Zandbergen as an advisor, mentor, and public speaker, and for more information on Optivest Wealth Management, please visit www.bartzandbergen.com.
It's time for the Talent Talk Radio Show, brought to you by People G2, a nationwide leader in background checks and employment screening solutions. People G2 gives their clients access to the best human capital management and due diligence tools available. They are dedicated to helping their clients with all of their people-related decisions. To learn more, go to www.peopleg2.com. Talent Talk centers on the topics of talent recruitment and management, leadership development, company culture, and employee engagement. These are all timely topics for CEOs, entrepreneurs, HR professionals, and business leaders. We hope that as you tune in to listen each week, whether to the live broadcast or to the podcast on iTunes or iHeartRadio, that you hear something you can take away that will help you grow and impact your career in a positive way. And now, here's the host of the Talent Talk Radio Show, the founder and CEO of People G2, Chris Dyer.
Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in here to Talent Talk. It's Tuesday, so I'm excited to bring in two more fantastic guests to talk about talent and culture and everything in between, and anything we're thinking about that might help us in our workplaces with our own development and certainly inside of our companies. So, Talent Talk is really centered around this idea that really came to me as I have met so many fascinating and inspiring leaders at different groups and events and through LinkedIn and through conferences. And so I wanted to bring them in and, hey, let's have a great conversation and let's allow everyone else who wants to listen to that conversation and even be a part of that conversation. So it's not just me learning all these cool things from all these cool people. And so many of the stories over the years that we have uncovered on this show have ended up in my first book, The Power of Company Culture. You can find that on Amazon or Bowl or wherever you buy books online. You can certainly get a copy. As I said, Talent Talk is live just about every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We record it live here most times in Orange County, California, as long as I'm not on the road. And, a lot of you get it after the fact. You get it on iTunes or you find it on iHeartRadio or Stitcher or wherever you go for your podcast. There we are. And we'd love to have you subscribe so you don't miss an episode and you can catch all your favorites and look into the past shows to see if there's anybody who you really want to listen to. We've had some big names on there that you might be interested in. One of the ways that we keep the conversation going is my social media guru, Sarah. She takes all of sort of the best things she's hearing as the show is happening live and place them on Twitter. So if you follow at PeopleG2, and if you follow that hashtag Talent Talk, all one word, you can see those posts kind of coming up as the show goes along. And if you want to comment, if you want to like it or repost or whatever it may be, argue with us, that's a great time to do it. And if you're getting the show after the fact, if you're not listening live, that's okay. All those tweets are still there. You can go find them. Usually if you find that, at PeopleG2 or one of the guest handles, it's a good place to find it and keep that conversation going. We've had that quite a bit lately where we've been able to sort of have conversations with our listeners on the different topics and keep it going. So it's really fantastic. All right. So speaking, I've been sort of teasing you about guests, and let's get to today's guests. My first guest will be Stephen Sisler, president of Behavioral Research Group. And then we're going to bring in Paul Gibbons all the way in from Ireland. He's a senior growth specialist of Global Shares. So we'll bring him in on the second half of the show, and we have to get him ready to go. But let's go ahead and bring in Stephen. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Fantastic. So, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about yourself, about your background and leadership, and, of course, tell us what you're doing over there at Behavioral Resource Group.
Okay, so the Behavioral Resource Group, I started it about 16 years ago. And I'm a behavioral profiler and a personality expert. So what we do is we create tools, which are our behavioral resources, which measure emotions, behavior, motivation, And we also have taken the algorithm for the Hartman value profile, and we've created our own tool with that in an effort to locate the way people think, how they make judgments, which emotions they rely on for making decisions in the world. And when we gather all of this data, it helps us understand specifically how people are likely going to do things. So when they're working with certain people, they're doing certain jobs, we can pretty much tell how that's likely going to pan out for them. So companies hire us in an effort to make sure they get all the right people in the right places. And they also hire us in an effort to know why is this particular portion of the organization experiencing this kind of turnover, or, you know, whatever the case may be. But because we know human beings so well based upon the measurements we gather, then we can tell them likely how something's going to happen. So I've been reading people since I was a child, and just have been pretty good at it. So I entered into this space, like I said, 16 years ago, and I had a business before that for 18 years, and within 7 months, this one eclipsed what that one did in all of 18 years as far as income. And since then, we've had clients in over 18 countries. So it really took off, and we've had clients that stick with us 10 years or more, simply because, you know, we understand all the people and how they tick, and then as they bring people into that culture, we're helping them make sure they stay with the same types of brain types for that culture. And that's pretty much what we do.
So it sounds like you're sort of really, you know, enhancing or shining a bigger light on the behavioral component, especially as companies are recruiting or thinking about who they want inside their organization. So maybe you can kind of talk about what does that really mean to you, that behavioral recruitment term?
Well, behavioral recruitment, we do everything all the way down to how an ad is written, because as you're soliciting to get people in, you know, people think that people are looking for a great place to work, but they're not. They're looking for great people to work with. And so once we understand who is in the organization and how they're wired, then we solicit the people by the way we word the ads. So if we're looking for a certain person, a certain people type, then we'll word it that way so that those who are that type will see that ad and say, oh my gosh, that's me, you know, and they'll respond. And we did this with a company in Australia. They were getting about 100 resumes a week, and when we changed the ad for them, it dropped it down to about 13. And so the people they were getting were more likely to fit the role than everybody else who was just applying because they simply needed a job. So that's part of behavioral recruitment. And the other thing is making sure it's the right type of thinking person that they need. It's not, people don't get in trouble because of what they're doing. Trouble comes because of the way they do it. And we're going to know the way people will do things. And if you need a certain type person, you know, it's very difficult to hire the right person the first time. And that's what we endeavor to help people do. And we pretty much bat 1,000 doing that. We've been doing it for all these years, and we've never had any problems with it. But it's a process that they have to be willing to go through up front. It's like marriage. You spend the right amount of time and energy in the front of the marriage. You're not working on all of it on the other end of on the other side of it. You know, it tends to be a little bit more blissful. But when you're not paying attention up front, that can bite you in the other side.
Yeah, and you know, and if organizations can take the right approach to it, it can really make a huge difference. You know, and so what are you seeing? Obviously, what you're offering and the tools and things that you're offering your clients are a part of this, but maybe even more broadly, what are you seeing organizations, or what are you thinking organizations really need to do to ensure that they are hiring the right people? Clearly, the behavioral part of it is important, but I guess more broadly, what are some of the things you're seeing that, you know, in 2019 that companies need to be thinking about?
Well, I think, you know, we encourage people to investigate people they're looking to hire on social media. We've had some pretty unscrupulous situations when they checked YouTube and different things like this, and they're like, oh my gosh, we're about to bring this person in. Right. And so there's that. we recommend, heavy reference checking. And when people delegate, if somebody delegates to me the process of recruiting, they're not doing it themselves, they farm it to me. Then if I'm hiring a male, I'll speak to their wife or their girlfriend, or if it's a female, their boyfriend or their husband. I talk to close family members. And what people don't realize is they're more likely to tell you the truth, actually, than friends. And so there's different things we do that ensure that we're not leaving any stones unturned. And we recommend everything from sex offense checks to credit checks and these types of things. But for the most part, if the companies aren't doing that, we'll recommend it. And if they are doing that, then we just come in with the behavioral, motivational, and axiological pieces, which are basically really drilling down into how this person thinks, how they make judgments, what their empathy is like. Are they a perfectionist? Are they results-oriented? All these different types of things. And so that becomes extremely important. And we had a company that really worked hard with us to make sure they got the right people. They moved people around because they realized some of these things that they were doing weren't working well for them, but they did it anyway because, they were trying to be faithful in their work. But once they moved them or changed them, things went a lot better. And within 18 months, they were up 40%. And it was just from rearranging, dismissing, or getting the right people in the right seats the first time. So that's the kind of stuff we do, and it's really, really beneficial. And we have a full 90-minute debrief on an individual that they're bringing in, or that they plan on bringing in an effort to show them exactly how this person thinks. And when you get a good alignment with what they're doing, who they're doing it with, and who they're doing it for, and the way they do it, then it's a marriage made in heaven.
Right. I know one of the areas of expertise that you have is in helping leaders and companies really center on that, the personal part, right, rather than the professional, maybe management techniques, maybe the stuff on the resume, I guess. Do you find that leaders tend to be open to this, or is it something that is maybe a little bit slower in the beginning and they sort of accept it over time as a sort of, maybe it's been demonstrated to them, or they can see that it's a valuable leadership skill?
Yeah, I think it's slower, and then over time they understand it, especially since we make predictions and they come true. But the more personal people are with individuals, the clearer the communication. This sounds very simple, but it's profound. 60 years of data proves that when people think you like them, they work hard for you. If they don't think that, they don't. So some people work for the weekend, some people work for their employer. So when we encourage being more personal than professional, that means sitting down with people and asking them if everything's okay, is everything going on okay at home, how was your weekend, what's going on? Because people come to work with real lives, and they try to put them on hold so they can do their job. But your real life affects that work life tremendously. And when people are engaged with people as whole people, they work harder, they feel understood. People typically don't quit work. They tend to quit a boss or a manager, and it's usually because they feel unappreciated or misunderstood. And so what we try to do is help them be more personal in their management relationships. A lot of managers think if I'm personal, then that makes me look weak and I start losing control. But the opposite is what actually happens. So we try to push that, and most of our clients get that and and work that way. Some, they just don't believe that.
Right. One of the things that I've seen, and we've had to kind of make this shift inside our organization, is that it's really easy to say, here's these 2 or 3 great employees that are in this particular department, and they have the right personality, they have the right motivation, they have the right approach to things from a behavioral standpoint. And so I would like to go and get 3 more just like them. I want to take their assessments, I want to crack their code, and then go back and do it for again, let's go find 3 more just like them and put them on the same team, and I can have even more success. and all of that. And so in theory, that sounds good, right? If you have three great people, why not find three more that kind of have that same, behavioral footprint? But what we found was that we actually needed to have some sort of diversity of thought, right? We needed to have some people that did think differently. Maybe they could still be compatible. That was important with the group. But to bring in three more clones, just like the other three we had, sort of really cut down on innovation. It really cut down on people, speaking up and saying if they disagreed, because they were suddenly now pushed even harder into things like group thought and things like that. So I'm kind of you're curious on what your thought process is on, what's the balance there? Do you agree or disagree with that? And how do you sort of, avoid some of those issues?
Yeah. No, I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying there. There is no clones. I mean, you can get similar profiles. You could even get two different people, and let's say you have the exact same profile, like just for some arbitrary reason. With the Hartman value profile, there's over 6 quadrillion different measurements you could get. So you never get the same one. But if you did, they would still be different because, part of being human is in your DNA. And so we have discovered, and this has been discovered through brain science and things like this, that 40 to 47% of who you are is in your genes. Nowadays they can scan your brain and tell you which political party you're affiliated with and be right over 70% of the time. So a lot of who we are is in the way we think. So you could be, a passive, resistive personality type that's a very strong thinker, and you could hire one just like that, but they're not going to do things the exact same way. So part of what we do is we just find out what is it you need, what are you looking for, and we try to benchmark that for them, and we're pretty successful in doing that. And again, we don't do things where we're just running numbers. I know a lot of times people spit out a report and the number is a 76 at the bottom, and they look at that number and say, this person is going to fit this role by 70% chance it's going to work out, or whatever that is. That's just really not a good way to do this. We converse with people, we talk with them. We recommend they go to dinner with them, have them on a neutral ground, and talk with them that way. But diversity, yes. People are all different. No matter what you try to do, you're going to have diverse people. But if you need several driving styles because the goal is getting things done in this particular department, then hiring a person who's extremely passive is likely not going to work for you. So although you may have multiple drivers in the role, they are not all the same. And we'll know what the differences are because we're measuring it.
Yeah, and I guess it gets into that sort of different approach if you're going to try to have people that are all, we can sort of put them, maybe their personalities are going to be remarkably, you kind of get 6 million, quadruple, whatever it was. There's so many different variations inside that one area, but we can't have people that tend to be, fairly technical or fairly, that kind of have a commonality about them. And I guess what we've seen, and this is sort of not only true inside of that part of it, but if you look at things like the success of Agile and Scrum, sort of bringing in different people who are different parts of the organization and different thought processes, and being able to have that sort of, behavioral diversity can sometimes really help teams meet their goals. I'm wondering if that, you're seeing, or you have some particular advice on, you get these people in, if they're using your process or whatever they're doing it, and they have the right people sitting in the right seats on the right bus. How do then leaders keep them motivated, especially through, maybe some specific direction through your work on through behavioral type things?
Well, I have found the best way to motivate people is self-motivation. Like, people need to motivate themselves. It's difficult if a leader, his job is motivating people. It should be managing them, not motivating them. So you want to try to find people that are self-motivated. And we can find those people. But motivation really happens when there's a synergy between what they're doing and the environment that they're doing it in. Motivation happens when I feel like I'm tapping into my best self and my real self when I'm working. In other words, a lot of times people will hire somebody and then they want them to do something that doesn't really connect with the way they do things or the way they think. And so what they have to do is make an emotional shift in the workplace and try to maintain it all day. We try to get individuals in spots where the way they are naturally is really what they need to be doing all day, so that they just go to work, they be themselves, and it works, versus going to work and trying to become Superman and then trying to hold that, all day long. It's exhausting. So this is why when people think a certain way, they view the world a certain way, they view people a certain way, and those ways that they do those things jive with what they're doing, then it becomes more effortless. And motivation really comes when, here's a good example. Let's say I like to be in charge of my own space. If I like to be in control of my own space, that means I'm an owner. It means I want authority that's equal to or greater than my responsibility. But let's say I don't get any authority. I'm not allowed to make decisions within my own department and with my own sphere of influence. Then I'm going to experience what's known as brain tension. And so I'm not going to like it. So I would be motivated if I had something to call my own and I was able to call the shots concerning it. So the best thing for a person who's an owner-type thinker is to put them in a position where they have some authority. Any other position will be demotivational for them, no matter what. So it's about aligning the way they are with what they do. And when you do that, motivation happens. It's not something we have to crack the whip in the chair to get the lion to do a trick. That's not what we do. We get people in positions where they're naturally being themselves and they like it. And then that creates what's known as self-motivation.
Right. And I think there's such a push. If we can give people autonomy, we can give them what it is inside of that sphere that makes them happy, that keeps them motivated, that connects to their behavior. And giving someone autonomy inside of it doesn't mean they can do whatever they want, but giving them the autonomy inside of that area which they should be able to control and manage and live inside of, that costs us nothing, right? As business owners, it costs us nothing to give them that. And yet what we get in return is incredible. People spend gazillions of dollars on these programs and things, and that don't get them anything like giving someone the autonomy to control their space, to control their environment, to do the job that they've been given to do, right?
Yeah, when people have freedom and autonomy, for a lot of people, it's better than money.
Right.
Being able to be me and enjoy me being myself and not try to be somebody else when I'm working is so liberating, and it's so motivating. There's nothing like being self-motivated, and that only happens when you can be yourself. And this is what we teach when we travel, and I put on seminars about being your best self and what that looks like. Like, I don't want people to change who they are. You should probably change where you're doing it. And one of my favorite sayings is, if you're a tomato, you're better off in a salad. If you're a hammer, you're better off in a toolbox. But at work, we got hammers in people's salads.
Right. And we're not doing anything about it. And I think that also sort of really contributes to people not meeting their own goals professionally, right? They are the hammer, and they're trying to go in and be in a salad, right? Whether it's they're choosing to be in that environment or someone has hired them to be in that environment. But maybe why else are people sort of missing the mark on what they're trying to achieve professionally?
Well, I think some people, okay, this is one of the things we measure. It's called self-direction. And so if I don't have much clarity on my future, in other words, I have poor clarity when it comes to my visions, my goals, and my future expectations, but yet I am 100% positively driven to arrive at a destination, even though I'm not quite sure where it is, then I can take a job and think it's one thing, and 6 months in, I find out it's something else because I had poor clarity. I wasn't thinking about those different aspects of it. What I was focused on is leaving where I'm at. And a lot of times when we're measuring people, we can see within their behavioral profile that all they're doing is leaving where they are. So it's not about where I'm going, it's what I'm leaving. And so all the energy is in leaving the first job, not entering the second one. And then when they get in that second one, more often than not, 5 to 6 months in, they realize they don't like it. Because what they were really doing was escaping, not entering. They were leaving, not entering. And so we look for people who have very clear clarity on where they're going and what they want and what their vision and their goals are for the future. Because if they're looking at this organization with that kind of a mindset, they're actually thinking, oh my gosh, this job is for me. This place is for me. And when you hire those kinds of people, they last a long time.
Right. Yeah. And isn't that what we want? We want our best people to stick around and to do a great job for us. And ultimately, we end up using, I think, if we're not applying that right strategy, we are losing our best people and keeping our B and C players around for far too long.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't keep good people because we don't want to pay for them, but somebody else will. And so I ask people all the time, I'll ask a client and say, okay, I said to one client, I said, you know, how's so-and-so doing? Oh, they're really great, but, you know, they're talking about leaving us. And so I don't know if we'll ever find another person like that. I said, well, why are they leaving? Well, they need to make more money. I said, well, what is the cost of trying to find somebody like this girl? They didn't expect that question. I said, would a $4 raise or a $3 raise be more than enough to keep a high-quality person that you in your own mind just told me you don't think you'll ever find again? I mean, what are you thinking? And then they snap out of it. And then they'll make that offer and keep them. I had an individual they were a current employee. We looked at the profile, and I knew by looking at that profile that this person was dissatisfied and was likely basically going to school on this person, so learning all they could learn so they could go do what they're doing there somewhere else or for themselves. So I met with the owner, and I told him about it, and he didn't really believe me. I said, will you do me a favor and just have a chat with this guy? And he said, sure, because he was running his whole operation. When he talked with him, he found out that he was dissatisfied and he was planning on leaving, and he wasn't even going to give him enough notice. And so what he did was he offered him some kind of a partnership in another endeavor that he was doing within the company, and the guy stayed, and I believe the guy's still there, and that was like 8 years ago. And later on, that guy told me it would have cost him over $1 million losing this guy.
That's crazy. Yeah, amazing how some of those things can happen, and it's really kind of sheds light on the importance of understanding your people. So how can people get a hold of you if they're interested in learning more, they want to maybe work with Behavioral Resource Group? What's the best way for them to do that?
Well, basically go to the Behavioral Resource Group, and there's ways to connect with us there. There's a phone number, there's a form you can fill out to ask us questions, things like that. Or just type in Steven Sisler into Google, and there's probably 6 pages there that'll come up that'll be able to point you in some direction, or at least hear me online, you know, doing podcasts or as a guest on a podcast or something like that, where I share a lot of stories about, you know, people and things that we've encountered over the many years that we've been in business. But just the behavioralresourcegroup.com without the. It's just behavioralresourcegroup.com.
Fantastic. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for being a part of the show today. And we'll be right back after this quick commercial break, and we'll bring in my second guest, Paul Gibbons.
Imagine buying a newspaper and discovering that the news you're reading is 6 months old. There isn't much that stays the same for 6 months. And the same thing goes for background checks. In a time when so much outdated information is being passed around, it's good to know that People G2 offers something different. At People G2, we provide today's intelligence, not yesterday's news. Our value-added approach offers you a fully FCRA-compliant solution that includes up-to-the-minute information. By combining industry-leading technology with old-school human investigation, People G2 is able to give you information that is accurate right now, delivered quickly through our online system, or integrated with your HR system. So ask yourself, are you comfortable working with old news, or are you ready for a different kind of background check company? Visit peopleg2.com or call 800-630-2880. That's 800-630-2880 or peopleg2.com.
Imagine what it would feel like to lose everything. Your job, your home, your family, your dignity. This has happened to thousands of the men, women, veterans, and young adults we serve at Working Wardrobes. What do we do to help? We provide career development services, life skills workshops, job skills training. We provide the perfect interview outfit, and we get clients placed in jobs. Call Working Wardrobes, 714-210-2460. Donate, volunteer, invest, hire.
Welcome back to Talent Talk Radio Show. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or iHeartRadio, or to go to talenttalkradio.com. You can also subscribe there to make sure you never miss a show. Wherever you find your podcast, you can find us there. And don't forget to follow our live tweets at PeopleG2, or follow that hashtag Talent Talk. You can see all the best one-liners and interact with the guests on Twitter today. So my next guest is Paul Gibbons, coming all the way from Ireland, Senior Growth Specialist at Global Shares. So Paul, welcome to the show.
Hey, I am glad to be here. Thanks for having me. Can I make 2 corrections?
Absolutely, because it wouldn't be a show if I didn't mess something up. So let's go for it.
So I live in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Oh, all right. Well, not Ireland. Fantastic.
And I have four Irish grandparents. So you're not a million miles away.
All right. Well, it's when you first started talking, I thought, well, maybe he moved to Ireland. So it makes a lot of sense.
Well, we can conduct this in an Irish accent if you like. I'd be very happy to do so, especially if I had a point. But anyway, no. Right. And the other small thing is I'm the author of a couple of books on change management and leadership,
which I think we're going to get to, right? And so maybe you can, of course, our producer Paul is now trying to show us Irish whiskey through the monitor, which none of our audience can see, but the rest of us can. So, and so tell me about let's start with the books. So, what are the books called, and what's the focus of them?
Well, I wrote one in 2015 that I just republished in 2019 called "The Science of Organizational Change," based on the idea that organizational change is full of myths and BS and, strategies that don't really work, particularly in today's world with complexity and pace of change. And then I wrote one called Impact, which is on the 4th Industrial Revolution, the future of work, with change in leadership as a backdrop. So how do you have to adapt change in leadership for the 4th Industrial Revolution?
Well, fantastic. So I know, how did you get into this? Let's start with that. Who are you and how the heck did you get into all of this before we start talking about your work and the things that I think are important for our listeners will be interested to hear about. But, how do you go from a small child to where you are today? Maybe not the whole history, but, how'd you get here in general?
I went to Wisconsin, even though I'm a Brit. And I went to Wisconsin and left Wisconsin as a math guy and went to work on Wall Street as a math guy, a derivatives trader, and, one of those guys. So I was very young, made a lot of money, wasn't very happy, which taught me something about the value of purpose at work and not a paycheck. I mean, I made $1 million a year when I was in my early 20s. That was a lot of money when I was in my early 20s as well. So it's not considered a lot of money for Wall Street today. But yeah, I did it. But I wasn't very happy. And I went into consulting at 32, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and was still a math guy. Working on derivatives risk management. So you remember that mess in 2008 when the financial system, went belly up? Well, it was my fault. Not entirely. I can't take sole responsibility. That would be very narcissistic, but we used to work on helping banks manage the risk of derivatives investment. And time and time again, we used to write recommendations, like math recommendations, like this is what you should do to run your derivatives business. And they used to more or less ignore them. They used to pay a lot for our consulting services. We were like McKinsey. And so I became fascinated by change, personal change, human change, leadership's role in change. And then I reinvented myself, became a psychologist, got another degree in philosophy, ran a consulting firm in Europe for 10 years. And then moved back to Colorado, where I live with 2 little boys, and I mostly write books. and do keynote speeches. So that's my shtick.
So let's maybe start with what's new about the fourth industrial revolution. And I don't know how much people understand, I mean, sort of the differences here in these different categories we've had. There's a lot with the speed of technology and what's happening, not only from like a microchip standpoint and an evolution of our actual technology, but then how it influences us from an evolutionary standpoint. But where is sort of your thought process on where we are there right now?
Well, what's different about the fourth industrial revolution is the first three industrial revolutions. Electrification was the second one. Fossil fuels were part of the second one. Steam and coal were part of the first one, and the third one was the microchip and the personal computer. What's different about those were tools that basically helped us do manual labor, and then moving into the third industrial revolution, some of our thinking. We had computers a tool to help us basically think. But the fourth industrial revolution is based around machine learning, Internet of Things, cloud computing, and a lot of that basically means that when you're running an organization today, you're running a mixture of machines and human beings. The downside of that is a lot of white-collar jobs are going to get lost. And if you remember the great globalization of the 1990s and 2000s, we didn't do a really good job as businesses or as a country of taking care of the people who were left behind. I mean, part of what happened in the 2016 election was a backlash against, people in middle America saying, hey, where's mine? I've been left out. I'm a manufacturing guy, or I'm a miner. I've been doing this for 30 years. I got to feed my family. There's a sort of people say globalization and trade make the pie bigger, but that's a sick joke if you've been fired and downsized and you and your community are out of work. So, making the pie bigger isn't enough. And the fourth industrial revolution is significant because that's going to make all of that just like hell of a worse. So McKinsey reckons that 100 million jobs could be lost or changed by 2030. Now, to put that in perspective for listeners, a big recession in 2008 is 10 million jobs. That's 100 million jobs. That's a lot of dislocation. And so workplaces have to be a lot smarter about how they lead their, how they attract and retain and develop talent as usual. But, how do we adapt our workplaces to this kind of new machine learning, artificial intelligence revolution? So that's the shtick, if you want, from the fourth industrial revolution.
So what really is the future of work as you see it? That, our listeners have probably been hearing a lot of different things about AI and about where work is headed. And, there's quite a few different stories out there, right? And so what are you sort of seeing as what's the realistic possibility of where that future of work is headed?
Well, we're going to keep going where we're going. So gig working is going to increase. So that offers workplaces and people who are gig workers a more flexible working environment. So that's definitely one thing. So workplaces that want a more flexible workforce don't have to hire and recruit, retrain, and develop. They can make increasing use of gig workers. And that's enabled by what's called the platform revolution. So all of the platforms, Uber's a platform, Airbnb is a platform, Salesforce is a platform, various platform technologies are making that much, much easier. And now you can have platform technologies for dog walking and for carers and all of that. So platform technology is going to be a big part of that. We're also going to be job sharing machines. So, the idea that there's a sort of human stuff that you do right now, if you're in IT, if you're further down in the IT function of a firm, you don't have to worry too much about people skills. Okay, they're important. And then there's the people that deal with the human side of organizations, management and leadership. And those are now in the process of merging. So we're going to be working, even if you're in human resources now, you have to understand data science, you have to understand behavioral science, you have to understand how to work with a technology-enabled workplace. So the chief executive of Microsoft says, every company is now a technology company. No matter what you do, we're all technology companies. That's no longer like an optional or an add-on or a way to increase efficiency. And so that means workplaces are going to be much more technological, right? And no matter where you work.
So there's kind of so much around that. I remember, back in the day when I had first started my company, we were, you give people training on, how to use Microsoft Word and how to use these different things. And now we just expect them to show up and know how to do these things. Much like we're just going to expect people to understand the things that you're talking about inside of an organization, to come with some understanding or training, and that we're not the ones going to be training them on how to maybe implement analytics or whatever to a company.
It's going to be it's going to be the ante, right? It's going to be the ante. Like losing Word and Excel's an ante today. Being able to understand data science and how to use rudimentary analytics and how to interact with analytics experts, that's going to be the ante. You're going to need to do that no matter where you are at work. So,
but I wonder though, to your first point about us sort of expanding, at least as a country, maybe globally this is a different answer, but let's just talk about from the United States perspective. If we see the gig economy growing, and I've wondered, is there a limit to its growth, or can it go as far as it maybe could go without the overarching sort of government maybe design, right? So if we don't have healthcare figured out, if we don't have our 401ks figured out, if we don't have some of these things figured out, it's a lot harder for people to then maneuver into the gig economy without having something more stable, right, where they can get their insurance or they can have their 401k and things like that. So what are your thoughts on, what point do those two things have to maybe come together a bit more to allow for that greater maybe growth inside of that gig economy?
Well, we're seeing it now, right? We're seeing it now is that, if you work for Uber, do you really work for Uber? Well, Uber would like to say, of course you don't, right? We don't have to worry about healthcare, benefits, or 401k, or employee protections, or sick days. They don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And you have to ask yourself whether that's an ethical model or not. And there are people who ask that question. I'm not going to weigh on it on it here, but should you Uber workers, for example, take that as an example, have some sort of unionization, a 21st century unionization, something like that, to begin to bargain for benefits with the company. So anyway, we're up against that now. We're up against some of the limits of the gig economy right now. And then obviously there are advantages to have a full-time worker, right? I mean, the tacit knowledge that it takes to operate in a business, the stuff that's really not in a textbook, the judgment, the knowledge of, as they sometimes say, where the bodies are buried. Well, you can't get that from a gig worker necessarily, right? It helps to understand the way politics work and the way the structures work and who, how do you get things done? And all of that kind of stuff is not the sort of thing that someone who's parachuted into a company will necessarily be any good at.
Yeah. And I guess it depends on the person, right? So there are those people that are existing in the gig economy as their full-time thing. That is what they do. And then there's an entire different cross-section of people that are coming into that gig economy saying, this is a small thing that I do to supplement my other larger, more consistent thing because I want to make more money. I want to go on vacation. My family has a special income need, whatever it is. And so, I think it's just sort of very complicated. Maybe we haven't done a particularly fantastic job, especially in this country, maybe figuring out how do we create the system to allow that to operate a bit better, right? And you can make the argument, well, get your insurance from your employer. You can make the argument, well, maybe you get your insurance from the government and get the employers out of the way, and then the gig economy can run. And this is not intended to be an overly political conversation here, but just there seems to be this need for some design or change in order for that to maybe really take off.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, healthcare is an interesting example. I've heard that General Motors spends more on health benefits than it does on steel. As their biggest single cost. We've outsourced that to corporations. That decision was made in the 40s and 50s in the United States. Mm-hmm. Other countries went the other way. They went to a more there's various different ones, but basically employers aren't a big part of the picture. And anyway, we don't need to make this political, but I think everyone will agree that we handle globalization and the downsizing of manufacturing industry in the United States and around the world really badly, as companies and as a government, as a society. Do we want to go through that again? Do we want to have? I married a girl from Dayton, Ohio, from Toledo, Ohio. That place is a ghost town. It's coming back. It's coming back now. But if you look at malls that are shuttered, factories that are shuttered, I worked in London most of my career, so I saw banks and marketing and lawyers, and everybody was a sort of a quote unquote white collar worker. When I got married, they were working at the Corning plant. They worked at the refinery. They worked at the Honda manufacturing plant. They worked at, this was the guts of America. These were the people that propelled America to sort of 20th century greatness. It's been desecrated, and so, you may think, oh, well, that's the way it has to happen. That's the way capitalism has to work, or something like that. But if you're a father or a mother trying to raise a family and your community, there are just no jobs in these communities. So it's a sad thing. And I think we're smarter than that as a world, and we're smarter than that as a country. And I think businesses need to be smarter than that too, than leading people by the side. Again, we got to grow the pie, but we also have to make sure that when we grow the pie, we grow it to some extent for everybody. I think that's the challenge.
Right. So what are some of the maybe cultural or mindset changes that you're seeing that maybe are coming or that need to come in order for this to, these things to happen?
Well, a lot of management decisions are made, people make them with their gut, right? They base it kind of on my experience. So that world is ending, right? We're going to be using a lot of data in our decision making. And that comes with a huge cultural change. There are very famous people, including the president of the United States, who says my gut's more important than experts in data, right? My gut does a better job. Without commenting on whether he's right or not or something like that, that won't fly in organizations. I remember we lost, there was $1 trillion environmental damage from the British Petroleum Deepwater Horizon explosion in 2010 that I cover in one of my books. One of the decisions that caused that explosion, that cost British Petroleum $100 billion and all the environmental damage, was a guy said, it's just a computer, it's just a model, I trust my gut. He wanted to trust his gut. The model was saying that, the amount of carbon monoxide that's coming from the floor of the well was at dangerous levels. And he's just like, oh, it's just modeling. That's a shortcut to it. Those sorts of, I know better than the model, I know better than the math, we need to get past that. We need to be a more science-driven and a more data-driven world.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I guess, we was sort of looking at this. You have spent a lot of time kind of writing about these things in some of the books that you mentioned. Where can maybe behavioral science and the things that you've sort of focused on, maybe how does that help? How does that start as an entry point for an organization to begin thinking about these things in a larger way?
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, behavioral science, when I read a book called Thinking Fast and Slow, I don't know if you stumbled across that.
I have. I generally suggest people go to The Undoing Project, which is a much more palatable book for people. And if they really like that one, then go to Think Fast and Slow. It's a little drier.
That's my boy, Mike Lewis. I worked with him in 1980s in London. He was a salesman in London when I was a trader in London. So
okay.
I'm still connected to Mike. But anyway, so Thinking Fast and Slow. So what's the great insight from that? If I had to summarize it in two sort of transformational insights. The first transformational insight is that as human beings, we don't collect data about the world through observation. I mean, that kind of data that we come from doing that. We don't collect data and then form our beliefs. We don't do that. We'd like to believe that, but what we tend to do is we filter the data we receive, we select the data received in order to reinforce our beliefs. Now, that's called
confirmation bias, right?
Yeah, 100%. That and a myriad of different varieties of things that look like the confirmation bias. So so that's one thing that's really interesting if you're trying to persuade someone in an organization. We spend as leaders a lot of time influencing people. Now, that's really interesting. If what we're doing when we're trying to influence is change people's minds, it's important to know that facts don't always change people's minds. And there's a guy I covered in one of the books who I think he's a political scientist. One of the things my books do that our books don't do is I take from medicine and political science, political theory, information theory, media theory. Most books on leadership and change are just essentially just psychology. But anyway, this guy, Brendan Nyhan, studies something called the backfire effect. Very interesting thing. If you provide people who are committed to a point of view ideologically with data, it reinforces their view. I'll say that again. So if you try and persuade someone with facts that climate change is real, or whatever they believe about welfare. A lot of these examples are from the political sphere because he's a political scientist. Their beliefs harden. So that's an interesting thing for a leader in organizations to think about, is how do we influence and motivate people when they're so resistant to facts? So interesting question. The second breakthrough insight from behavioral science is that we'd like to believe that we have this family of beliefs and those guide our actions. So I believe X about the world, right? Say I believe, I ought to be 25 pounds lighter, right? That's a belief. Or I ought to eat more green vegetables and fruit, right? Those are beliefs about the world. To what extent do those guide my actions? The answer is, as we know from our own lives, right, imperfectly at best, right?
Right.
So beliefs, we'd like our beliefs, our cognitive, great, huge frontal cortexes to be deciding what we do in the world. In practice, that's not the way it works. In fact, beliefs often adapt themselves to your behavior. What I mean by that is that if you're, for example, if you're a smoker, you're more likely to disbelieve research on smoking, for example. If you're, you drive a Ford F-150, you're less likely to believe data on climate change. So these are the kinds of things that we need to worry about, is that when you want to influence someone's changing behavior is what you need to do in change management and leadership in organizations. If you want a two-step model, first I have to influence the guy, and then once I change what's inside their heads, I have to hope that that translates into action. That model of change, that influence first, influence, persuasion, training and development, all that stuff is imperfect. So enter behavioral science, enter thinking fast and slow, enter the Undoing Project, enter predictably irrational. What are some strategies you can use in change to short circuit this thing up here, the frontal cortex, and actually get people doing the right thing, because behaviors matter more than what's inside people's heads, right?
And often it's just getting them to recognize it, to realize that it's going on, because to your point, they think, right, that they are. There's another book recently I read called Atomic Habits, where he says, if you're trying to lose weight, ask yourself before you go order a meal, what would a healthy person order, right? We think we're healthy. We view ourselves as healthy people, and yet we're ordering a burger with fries and a milkshake, and that's not what a healthy person would order.
That's right, and that's part of the behavioral science toolkit that's in one of my books called Impact. That's called ego and identity. Is you use someone's identity or ego, and the identity is I'm a healthy person, right? Yeah, we're using that to drive behavioral change. It's interesting. It's an interesting idea. So in Google, for example, let's make this real. This is a business podcast, and this is a business example. People didn't used to show up for training courses, right? They'd book them. They were filled, so people couldn't get in. And then on the day, they decided not to go. So that means there's empty seats, and people aren't there who want to be there. So one of the things they did is they appealed to the Google identity. Googlers, as they call themselves, are proud of their googly behaviors. And they said this just isn't a very googly thing to do. Ditching a training course and leaving empty seats costs us money, costs people a place, costs you learning. Don't do that. Not very googly. So you can use identity to drive behavioral change.
People like us do things like this. Yeah, absolutely.
Correctamundo. Exactly. Yeah. I'm the sort of guy who does that. Yeah.
So we're just right here at the edge here where we need to wrap this up. I want to make sure I ask you very quickly, what are you reading right now?
Oh God, I'm reading History of London. I'm reading a book by Andrew McAfee, who's written a book called The Dematerialization. He's a thinker from MIT. I'm interviewing him on my podcast, which is called Think Bigger, Think Better. I'm interviewing him in a couple of weeks, so I'm reading his book. I am reading Game of Thrones, Volume 1.
Oh, fantastic. Well, some good options there. We love to ask that question because our listeners love to get ideas and suggestions from people they admire about what they should be reading or thinking about. So final question, how can people find out more about you, your company, your books? What's the best way for them to figure that out?
Yeah, just check me out at paulgibbons.net or check out some of my presentations on SlideShare. I just put up a big presentation on behavioral science and the fourth industrial revolution on SlideShare. Take a look at it, scan through it, see if there's anything catches your eye. But paulgibbons.net is kind of the resource for all things Paul Gibbons. The book's called Impact, 21st Century Change Management digital transformation in the future of work. It's got a lot of behavioral science in it. First book, Science of Organizational Change. So one-stop shop, paulgibbons.net or at Paul G. Gibbons on Twitter.
Fantastic. And Paul, thank you for calling in from Colorado today, not Ireland, despite our best attempts to relocate you. But it was good that you were, it's time in London. So we were just a little late. I mean, we were close, just a bit late. So.
Oh, well, it was really interesting. And I hope you found it valuable. I hope your listeners found it valuable. I guess we're very close to the end here. I'm seeing your guy going.
Yep. So, thank you so much for being a part of the show today. We'd love to have you come back and keep the conversation going. There was so much more to talk about that we didn't get to. But I hope people will check you out and your podcast and your books and everything else. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, next week, my guests will include Todd Frazier, content creator and business strategist and speaker, and Derek Waters, Regional Vice President of Operations for UPS. So until then, do what you love and show the world how talented you can be today.
You've been listening to Talent Talk Radio, brought to you by People G2.
CRM was designed for managing relationships. Sales engagement is designed for starting them. Current stats indicate that sales reps only contact new leads about 50% of the time and make less than 2 attempts to contact them. And they're only about 35% productive. CRM is the wrong tool to engage sales prospects. VanillaSoft is an engagement platform. It allows you to rapidly turn marketing qualified leads into sales qualified leads. According to user reviews, VanillaSoft will increase your pipeline and productivity by 3 times or more by ensuring each new sales lead is engaged within seconds persistently and with the cadence that's optimal for your prospects. Don't let your sales leads fall into a black hole. Take your lead engagement and sales qualification out of your CRM. Try VanillaSoft for free at vanillasoft.com.
OC Talk Radio. Streaming, not screaming.
We're back here with Charlie Wright, who's had a show with us for 4+ years on alternative investments. And I'm just curious, what have you learned in that time, Charlie?
You know, Paul, it has been fascinating. We have interviewed, as you well know, because you've produced every single one of them here. Well, we have interviewed economists, newsletter publishers, authors, but primarily CEOs and chief investment officers and portfolio managers of investment strategies that are a bit outside the mainstream. And that's why they're called alternative investments.
Yeah, it's not the typical buy and hold stocks and bonds type of approach.
Right. And these interviews have just been fascinating. I remember Danielle DiMartino Booths. She's a gal from Wall Street, got a master's degree in journalism, started writing for the Dallas newspaper, and she was hired by the Dallas Federal Reserve. Then she worked for them for 9 years and then wrote a book. We interviewed her about the book. Fascinating stuff. She was there at the Fed in the crisis of 2008, and she has some great insights and opinions about what happened and about the economists there who had all these PhDs, but number one, they all signed up for groupthink, and that's what they do. They, you know, it's anointed at the top, and there's groupthink. And then they were typically unaware of what was happening in the real world.
Insights you couldn't otherwise get.
That's right. It was fascinating. And we interviewed another guy on that same subject of 2008. And he knew the 4 groups of people in The Big Short, the book and the movie. And I had read the book.
I think he worked for Credit Suisse.
Yeah, he did. Right? He did. And he knew them all and just had some great insights on what happens there.
Well, you know, I hear this over and over again. People go into it for various reasons. They want to brand themselves a thought leader. Look at who I know. Look at what I know. That's why a lot of show hosts get into this. Or they just want to create content for their website, for their social media. They can't write enough stuff, so by interviewing people, they create content for all those different channels. But one of the things, the unexpected things, is how much people learn along the way. Talk about that.
It's unbelievable. You know, as you're well aware, I do a pre-interview for typically about an hour, a week or two before the show, and then often we talk for 15, 20 minutes. So we learn so much, not just from the show's interview, but from those other things. For example, there are 3 sites that we have talked about, and they provide kind of a democratization of investing. And they take these investment managers who are not professionals, and they give
come
them
up with a
site.
Strategy. Right?
Yeah, they come up with a strategy, and then they have a site that confirms and verifies all of their trades.
And you can trade along with them if you want.
Yeah, that's right. And it's just fascinating to read the stories of and talk to these traders who do this, and they're living all over the world, many of them.
Well, you know, and it goes to the heart of what, again, is so special about your show, and that is that you bring forth people, ideas, strategies that I don't hear anywhere else, as it says in your tagline. Strategies you are not hearing elsewhere. You really do find these things, whether it's the books you mentioned or the unique platforms like Collective 2, or just the unique strategies. You're talking to top-level hedge fund managers, mutual fund managers, that you, even as a sophisticated RIA, wouldn't normally get to talk to.
Yeah, that's right. And another example is I went to a conference, as you're well aware. They called us and asked me to come do podcasts at the conference. It was the second year that I did that. And I interviewed 12 investment managers at this conference. 3 of them, Paul, as you probably recall, have PhDs in engineering. One of them was from Stanford.
Right.
One was from Michigan State. I don't recall the third. They all 3 had careers in engineering and then left those careers or retired and started managing money.
Well, even beyond the fascination you obviously have for meeting all these unusual people here, talk about how you've actually used what you've learned. You've actually applied it, you told me, to some of your clients and have become a better investment advisor for them in the process.
Well, there's no question about it, because I'm inundated with all of these examples and stories and ideas. And for example, options. I mean, people see options as higher risk, but when you really understand them, they can be lower risk.
They can actually be a way to mitigate risk, as they talk about. It's hard for me to picture that, but they've talked about it at length here. Well,
and then also, Paul, a couple of things, and I have you to thank for this. One of the things I always ask is, what keeps you awake at night? And you were the one who recommended that.
Yeah, because you got to get
very insightful.
You got to get past the script. I'm not saying our script, it's a script that they come in with. They've got an agenda of things that have been approved and discussed and polished, and that's great. We want to hear what their approach is, but we've got to understand something about them and how they think, and I think that question gets to the core of that. What keeps you up night?
It does. It does. And you know what's so interesting, as you and I noticed, it was early 2016, so we'd had the program for a couple of years. And when I asked that question, you know, we got a variety of answers, but starting early in 2016, we kept getting the same repeated answers. The world geopolitical situation.
The chaos of the world.
Right. That's right, over and over. So, Paul, we look forward to offering this. It's intriguing, it's interesting to audiences, and look forward to it. And thank you for producing the show and helping in a variety of ways.
Well, it's been educational for me as well. I had no idea. When you walked in the door and said you were going to talk about alternative strategies, I thought you meant gold or coins or baseball cards. I didn't know there were so many sophisticated ideas that I guess weren't accessible to the average person like me, and you've brought it out. So I appreciate the education I've gotten and the information that you've been able to uncover and bring out to the world as a whole. A fascinating show. It's certainly taken off in ways we never imagined, and certainly grown to become much bigger than anything we could have envisioned in the beginning here.
Thank you, Paul, and we look forward to many more.
Hey, welcome back. It's time for another episode of the OC Spotlight, the one show that takes a look at the most incredible people doing the most amazing things right here in your own backyard. And today, well, guys, you want to listen up on this one.